My apologies for the delay, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The meeting is live now, and we're good to proceed.
Well, good evening, everybody. And we're very sorry for the delay there. We're about 10 minutes late, but we really appreciate everyone joining us for our special council meeting. It's November the 15th, 2021. And it is on the Guelph Transit Action Plan, the route review and recommended plan. And we're going to call the meeting officially to order here and start with our clerk putting our country's flag up there for a moment as we focus on that before we continue. Great, thank you. And now just for a moment of silent reflection. Great, thank you. And our territorial acknowledgement. As we gather, we're reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we both live and work. And today we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting tonight. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or any general nature thereof for the item in front of us tonight? I don't hear or see any, so thank you very much. As I stated off the top, our title here for this special council meeting is Guelph Transit Action Plan, the route review and recommended plan. We have several presentations all together from our staff, and our Deputy CAO, Colleen Quackbush, will introduce everyone and walk us through the presentation. And then as you can see, we have a few delegations that have signed up as well. So after the staff presentation, we'll move into several of the delegations as well. And then when that's done, we can look to move into the recommendations that are provided by staff as well. Just so everyone has a little bit of context before we kick off here, the recommendations that are in front of us at this point are looking for to be only a referral to the budget. So if anyone's kind of listening and following along, our budget comes up on December the 2nd. This is a really detailed plan that required a little bit of focus, which is why we had the special council meeting. But the recommendations that are in front of us tonight are looking to be punted, if I could use that word, punted to December the 2nd, where the actual budget deliberations are. So no decisions are really being made tonight. That's what's prepared for us in advance. With that, the topic is still important, and I will now mute. It's so important you don't want to hear from me anymore. So we'll go to our Deputy CAO to start us off with the staff presentation. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Just a few opening remarks while our staff are getting the slides up. And so we'll just give them a second. I think we need to switch to presentation mode because we can see the notes there on screen. So we'll just give the staff a moment to switch that display setting for us. As we're doing that, this plan does mark the completion of months of our data collection, analysis, and public engagement since October 2019 when we began this journey together. The final results of this route review, or which we've called the Guelph Transit Action Plan, are before you tonight. And we're very pleased that with this plan we can still meet our overall strategic plan targets despite the delays from COVID-19 that we've experienced since we started out on this journey of this route review. And so the recommendations from this plan do lead us forward both with transit, but I also want to highlight that this strongly connects to many other facets of our strategic plan. And so this isn't just about transit tonight. This is sort of a foundational building block as we look to the targets that we have under our transportation master plan. And so our active transportation targets, or when we look at reducing greenhouse gases and our climate change targets, this is a really key and important piece of that puzzle that all fits together. So as you'll see throughout the presentation, the staff recommendation is called the Future Ready Plan. And so you'll hear us referring to that throughout the presentation tonight. And as the Mayor said, we're not asking you to vote on any of the financial implications of this tonight. That will be referred to the budget discussion. So any of those financial implications will be referred. But there are still recommendations before you for this evening, referring it to budget, but there's also some recommendations before you related to sort of the approval in principle of the staff Future Ready Plan, as well as an important recommendation related to executing the ICIP transfer payment agreement. And so that will be before you for your consideration. But with that, I'm going to start off turning it over to Robin Garris, our General Manager of Guelph Transit, to introduce our staff presentation in more detail.
Thank you, Colleen. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and colleagues. It has been a long road to get to the recommendations presented today. Guelph Transit has been continuously working on implementing new projects to improve business operations even prior to the route review process. As we continue our journey, we look back at the milestones. In 2010, the transit growth strategy and plan was implemented. In 2015, a new Trapeze intelligent transportation system was implemented. In 2017, there was a route realignment. This was followed by the RideCo scheduling software being implemented as a pilot project for mobility services in 2018. This project became permanent in August 2020. In 2019, the Guelph Transit Business Service Review was conducted to identify what transit does well and what opportunities were available to improve our overall business. This served as a catalyst for the route review that is presented to you today. During this time, Transit has introduced the On Your Way fare card as part of our electronic fare management system and on-demand transit service options to our customers, all while navigating through the challenges of a global pandemic. Guelph Transit looks to be future ready beyond 2021 with the completion of a transit fare strategy, the Guelph Transit Master Plan, fleet electrification, ICIP funded projects, a new operations campus, a new South End Transit Terminal. All of these projects will ensure that we navigate our future beyond 2031. Now I would like to introduce Andrea Mikula, our Planning and Scheduling Supervisor, to help guide us through the next part of the route review presentation.
Thank you, Robin. This plan was built on a detailed analysis of the existing service, comparison to similarly sized communities, and public feedback on the existing and initially proposed systems. The timeline of the plan consisted of 4 phases, including initial data collection and phase 1 public engagement, developing preliminary recommendations, phase 2 public engagement, route refinement, and incorporation into long-term plans. The streams of information used in creating this plan were an existing network analysis, where existing network conditions were analyzed using ridership and on-time performance data, and existing policy and industry guidelines were used to assess the network. A peer review, where Guelph's transit system was compared to case studies of transit systems in similarly sized cities that have completed a network redesign to find options and insights that would be transferable. And community priorities, feedback was sought in 2 phases from community leaders, staff, current transit users, and potential future transit users through a range of online techniques. These techniques included focus groups, surveys, town halls, and question and answer forums. The analysis of community priorities included reviewing existing city plans to ensure the recommendations of this plan align with meeting long-term goals and visions. The result of this process is the Guelph Transit Action Plan. The plan aims to understand the needs of current and future residents to create a transit system that better serves even more residents and continues to grow with Guelph. The main objective of the Guelph Transit Action Plan is to create a competitive, convenient, and reliable transit network that meets the needs of today's and tomorrow's customers. The improvements needed to achieve this objective have been outlined through this plan and incorporate best practices in service design and infrastructure that have been tailored to the unique context of Guelph and its residents. Guelph plans and strategies identify transit as integral to moving throughout the city. The goals of many of these plans aim to increase the transit modal share and get people out of cars. Beyond this, there are many social, environmental, and economic benefits to investment in transit, both direct and indirect, that also align with the pillars of the strategic plan. Some of these benefits are as follows. Relating to equity, transit is an essential service that provides a basic level of mobility to those that cannot drive due to physical, economic, or social constraints. Transit provides access to essential destinations like employment, healthcare, education, and other services, and many employers in Guelph depend on transit service for their employees. Investment in transit allows for better coverage of the city to ensure everyone has suitable access, particularly for those who rely on transit as their primary mode of transportation. Relating to health and safety, as transit travel increases, generally per capita traffic fatality rates decrease, particularly for the most vulnerable road users, which are pedestrians and cyclists. As well, transit passengers have a significantly lower traffic fatality rate than automobile occupants. Transit usage reduces sedentary lifestyles that are linked to many diseases, such as heart disease and diabetes. Transit users, on average, walk approximately 5 to 15 minutes more per day than non-transit users. It is recommended that the average adult walk 22 minutes per day to achieve the appropriate amount of physical activity. Transit usage reduces the number of GHG-producing vehicles on the road that are harmful to human health. This indirectly reduces the cost of healthcare due to the reduction in air pollution-related chronic diseases. Air pollution ranks as the top environmental risk factor for premature death and disability in Canada. Relating to the economy, increased transit ridership aids in reducing traffic congestion and long commutes that are associated with billions of dollars lost in productivity in Canada each year. Investment in transit has the potential to reduce infrastructure costs associated with road expansions and parking facilities to accommodate private vehicles. Transit creates more local jobs, both in the transit industry and in other sectors. It's estimated there's a potential yield of 49,700 jobs per $1 billion US invested in transit. Relating to the environment, as transit usage increases, air quality improves. Transit produces 50 to 95% less GHGs per passenger mile than private vehicles. Private vehicles are the largest contributor to a household's carbon footprint, and changing from a two-car to a one-car household has potential to reduce a household's carbon footprint by 30%. This also reduces non-renewable fuel dependency. Many city documents and policies are supportive of transit improvements. These documents are as follows. The final theme of the community plan is we move around freely and is central to the community's transportation network. Within the vision of this theme, it's stated that transit is a priority. It's frequent, it's affordable, and it can get us to work and to neighboring communities. Increased use of transit and active transportation routes help address the traffic congestion that can follow rapid growth. The strategic direction of this theme is to ensure that transit is available to all, inclusive of ability and exceptionality, and is well connected. A number of sections within the official plan specifically identify policies related to transit, but overall, the official plan specifies that the downtown, intensification corridors, community mixed-use nodes, arterial roads, regional parks, and higher density mixed-use areas will be the priority locations for transit service. Areas with existing service will also be the focus of improvements. Lastly, transit is intended to be highly accessible for all. The ongoing Guelph Transportation Master Plan and the Transit Action Plan were conducted simultaneously and are supportive of each other. The recommended plan aligns with the Transportation Master Plan's values of being safe, equitable, complete, sustainable, affordable, and supportive of land use through creating a more connected route network with increased service frequency. These changes support the proposed transit priority measures in the Transportation Master Plan to achieve a quality transit network. Last, as part of the development charges study, a comprehensive forecast for transit servicing needs was conducted and identified that a target of 13% is a realistic transit modal share goal to 2031, which equates to 9.19 million annual ridership, and a target spare bus ratio of 20% is recommended, which would be implemented through the purchase of 51 additional buses by 2031. The proposed plan will exceed this modal share goal with a lower number of additional buses required. The recommendations from this action plan will also be key in Transit's upcoming fare strategy and Transit Master Plan. Guelph Transit's conventional service as of January 2020, which is the pre-pandemic service, is made up of 35 routes operated by 62 40-foot buses during peaks and 182 transit operators. The current service is made up of one spine route, local routes, University Express routes, one express route, late night routes, and on-demand service that was introduced this year. Guelph Transit currently provides a high level of coverage across the city, but does not provide quick service in most instances. Many local routes consist of large one-way loops and require transfers downtown, even when this requires a great deal of out-of-direction travel. In short, a passenger can get almost anywhere in Guelph, but their trip is likely to be significantly longer than someone driving a car to the same location, which is not conducive to attracting new ridership. Guelph has the advantage of a relatively grid-like street network, which is beneficial to introducing a grid-like transit network with more crosstown routes and routes that completely bypass a hub when appropriate. Transit service guidelines are used by transit agencies to design and maintain their transit network. They are central to a successful revised network for consistency in future decision-making and route monitoring. The proposed service guidelines for Guelph Transit were consolidated and updated from several city documents. These guidelines are service design standards, which include specifics of route categorization, service coverage, minimum frequencies and span of service, stop spacing and placement, and bus stop amenity prioritization. Service level targets, which define when service should have increased or decreased frequency, increased or decreased service hours, and modified schedules based on passenger loads and on-time performance. Service expansion targets that define when service should be implemented in new areas, and service review targets to ensure appropriate data, including financial performance, are reviewed at regular intervals. An initial plan was presented for public consultation in May this year. From this feedback, the proposal was adjusted wherever possible. The main differences from the original proposal and those presented today are related to the implementation timeline, some service levels, particularly Sunday service, and routing adjustments to either accommodate connections or alleviate traffic concerns. The Guelph Transit Action Plan proposes to redesign the current transit network into one of three proposed network option plans. These plans are the Future Ready Plan, or the staff recommended plan, the 1% Levy Plan, and the High Frequency Plan, which will be discussed shortly. All three plans will have a more grid-like system that allows residents to take more direct trips with fewer transfers, four cross-city routes, on-demand holiday and morning and evening Sunday service, and fewer one-way loops. All three plans will also incorporate 3 interregional transit routes, which are Guelph Central Station to Pine Bush Station in Cambridge in 2025, Guelph Central Station to Fairview Park Mall in Kitchener in 2026, and Guelph Central Station to Aberfoyle in 2027. Engagement will be conducted prior to introducing these routes to confirm the destinations and implementation order. The map shown here visualizes where major routing changes are occurring with the implementation of the Future Ready Plan. Green represents areas with new network coverage, while pink represents areas with coverage that currently exists and will be maintained, and orange represents areas where existing coverage will be removed. On-demand bus stops are shown in dark pink. As you can see, many areas across the city will be provided with new service coverage. In particular, areas that have or will experience new growth will have service coverage, such as in the South End Industrial Parks and Clare Maltby neighborhood. Any areas that have removed service coverage or areas that are difficult to service with conventional routing will be serviced by the on-demand bus. Here are the three options developed. First is the staff recommended plan called the Future Ready Plan, which incorporates some higher frequencies than originally proposed on 5 routes and on-demand Sunday service to extend hours. The majority of this plan is completed within 7 years, except extensions to the Clare Maltby Transit Terminal that would occur in year 10. This requires 100 additional operators and 26 additional buses. The next option is the 1% levy plan that focuses on maintaining the 1% levy mandate as directed by Council at the December 1st, 2020 Transit Growth Strategy Workshop. This is essentially the same as the staff recommended plan in design and cost, but implementation would be more evenly spread over 10 years to reduce the yearly impact. Last is the high frequency plan. As the name implies, this plan is more ambitious than the staff recommended plan. This plan has the same design and implementation timeline as the staff recommended plan, but there are some additional peak and midday frequency increases on 6 routes, additional off-peak frequencies on 4 routes, and 1 route extension. This requires 131 additional operators and 35 additional buses. The Future Ready plan has been selected as the staff recommended plan because it takes public feedback greatly into account while being financially conservative. The high frequency plan would incorporate public feedback to a greater degree, but would require significantly more resources. The 1% levy plan keeps within the 1% levy mandate, but does very little in the way of incorporating public feedback. The most common feedback was the desire to have the plan implemented in less than 10 years. Guelph Transit retained Dillon Consulting to provide ridership and revenue projections for proposed networks that resulted from the route review. From this, staff have identified the financial implications for each of the 3 package options. It's important to note that inflation has been built into the expenses and revenues, as well as that revenues include expected growth and a UPass agreement with Conestoga College. Additionally, the expenses are based on fuel prices, but the savings from electrification have not been captured in the expenses. In terms of operating expenses, the Future Ready plan has an all-in 10-year additional operating cost of $17.21 million, not including revenue. The 1% levy plan has an all-in 10-year additional operating cost of $17.41 million, not including revenue. And the high frequency plan has an all-in 10-year additional operating cost of $22.58 million, not including revenue. All of these expenses account for fuel, maintenance, and the necessary FTEs. The Future Ready plan and 1% levy plan would both require 122 new FTEs, while the high frequency plan would require 159 new FTEs. As mentioned, Dillon Consulting was retained to conduct a ridership forecast for the 10-year plan. Revenue from ridership and other indirect sources would result in the Future Ready plan having a total net operating cost of $13.08 million. Please note that in 2022, the operating cost of $1.82 million includes costs for 5 operators to achieve the staffing levels recommended in the business service review, as well as 2 supervisors to meet industry best practices for staffing ratios. These costs are in addition to 7 additional operators and 2 NUMI positions required for the recommended service changes. The total property tax levy impact would be 1.26% increase for 2022 and 0.45% for 2023 to fund the Future Ready plan, as well as fund the capital requirements of the plan. This table shows the operating cost of the 3 different plans offset by projected revenues. The net cost of the Future Ready plan is $13.08 million, while the 1% levy plan is $13.37 million, and the high frequency plan is $18.17 million. The 1% levy plan will ultimately the same final outcome as the Future Ready plan, is more expensive due to the drawbacks of deferring changes such as inflation and loss of ridership. The Future Ready plan also stays within the 1% levy mandate in most years of the plan. It's important to note that ridership increases are not immediately realized when route changes are implemented, thus this impacts the revenues. The 1% levy plan will ultimately have similar total revenues to the Future Ready plan, but will not be realized until beyond 2031. The first table here shows the number of buses needed to implement each plan, including buses for the spare ratio and interregional service. The Future Ready plan and 1% Levy plan will both require 26 additional buses, and the high frequency plan will require 35 new buses. The table to the right outlines the capital cost for each year of the Future Ready plan, with an ultimate cost of $37.26 million. The Future Ready plan is an integral part of overall transit capital investment. Should the plan not be approved, there will be an impact on the other capital investment projects which will still move forward. Along with the Future Ready plan, the following transit projects are planned for the next 15+ years. Construction of a new transit operations campus, construction of a new facility at Guelph Central Station, electrification of the existing and all future transit buses, and investment in additional buses to meet continued population growth. The total capital investment required over the next 10 years is $253.9 million, but the direct capital investment of the Future Ready plan is only 15% of this amount, or $37.63 million for the purchase of 26 buses. The capital funding has various sources which include DC's ICIP, Provincial Gas Tax, 100 Renewable Energy Reserve Fund, City Building Reserve Fund, and Infrastructure Renewal Reserve Fund. This slide shows the breakdown of funding sources for the route review and other capital investment projects. Of the $37.26 million needed for the direct costs of the route review, 40% is funded by DCs, 44% by ICIP, and 16% by 100 Renewable Energy Reserve Fund. The Future Ready plan is an integral part of the overall transit capital investment, but there are many capital projects that will still continue even if the plan is not approved. These other capital projects are funded by all the sources previously mentioned. The DCs have been identified in the 2018 DC background study and are being collected to fund the system growth portion of the plan. The ICIP projects have been approved, but final transfer payment agreement completion is still pending and requires council approval of this plan and direction to enter into the agreements. The provincial gas tax amounts are assumed to be consistent with 2021 amounts. The tax funding that is required is to support the goal of 100 Renewable Energy Reserve Fund by converting all buses to electric over the next 15+ years, and the portions of the plan which are considered city building. This funding has not been approved by council and is identified in the budget request presented as part of the 2022 city budget. $850,000 is required to fund 100 Renewable Energy Reserve Fund annually, which represents 0.32% property tax levy increase, and $716,100 is required annually for 10 years to fund city building, which represents 0.27% property tax levy increase for 2022. The next steps for moving forward with this plan are based on the recommendations provided in the staff report. The first step towards service implementation will be to have council approve the Future Ready plan and forward the report for budget approval. If approved, staff will then create a detailed service implementation plan that includes activities such as testing and confirming routes, creating an infrastructure plan and a communications plan, and developing revised materials like route maps and schedules. If council approves the recommendation to begin implementation in spring 2022, once changes have started to be made, there will be regular monitoring of routes. This will be based on the transit service guidelines if they are also approved by council, and from feedback from the public, as well as monitoring the overall status of the plan to adjust routes and years of implementation as needed. If approved, the recommendations of the route review will be included within the upcoming Guelph Transit Master Plan, along with the upcoming transit fare strategy. The fare strategy will identify opportunities for fare increases that does not depend solely on the RC ratio that will be fluctuating during the implementation of the Future Ready plan. This is why fare increases triggered by the RC ratio targets should be paused until the completion of the fare strategy. Finally, the ICIP agreement provides a substantial amount of capital funding required to fund the route review recommended plan and thus should be executed. To meet the obligations of the ICIP transfer payment agreement, transit needs to grow the system, increase ridership, and increase modal share. If the Guelph Transit Action Plan is not approved, the city must renegotiate the current approved ICIP projects. In conclusion, the City of Guelph is rapidly changing and growing, with pressure to accommodate a significantly larger population within the next 30 years. A connected and effective transportation system is necessary for meeting the needs of current and future residents, in which a viable transit system is a key component. The existing transit network is limited in its ability to not only service a growing population, but to meet the city's strategic goals, such as modal share and sustainability. The Transit Action Plan outlines the actions the city should take to revitalize its transit network into a convenient, attractive, and efficient transit system that will grow with the city. I will now pass it back to Colleen.
Thank you, Andrea, and to the whole team. And I just want to acknowledge the incredible work of the entire transit team, along with those in our finance staff who are here tonight. And in particular, Andrea, having a professional transit planner on staff to bring this route review forward has been absolutely instrumental for us in bringing you these recommendations tonight. So to Andrea and to Robin, but also we have a number of staff here who will be available after the delegations to answer questions. And I would just want to acknowledge Ujwal Verma, Carissa Matson, Courtney McDonald, and Jason Simmons, who are here from Transit, Glenn Marcus as well from our service area, as well as Tara Baker and Greg Clark from Finance. So a huge team has come together to bring these recommendations before you tonight, and I want to give a lot of credit to them for all of this hard work that they've done to bring this forward. And then lastly, just before we conclude our presentations, we want to turn it over to Susan Carey, who is the chair of the Council-appointed Transit Advisory Committee, who's also been instrumental in working with us on this route review. I think hopefully we have her in now, if not on video, by phone. And so she will be the last speaker under this presentation portion this evening. And so I will turn it over to Ms. Carey if she is online.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am here. I'm the mysterious unseen stranger. And good evening, everyone, Council, Mayor, and everyone, the great team at Guelph Transit. I've sat on the TAC for a couple of years now, and because an efficient and effective transit system is key to a healthy city, and that's something I really strongly believe in. It's not an add-on. It's not a service aimed at those who can't afford a car. It's essential, and its use should be universal. And we want a city where transit offers an appealing alternative, where people say, hey, great, I don't have to drive there. I can take the bus and read my book. And key to building that city is transit routes that are updated, that are frequent, that are efficient, and service every area of the city well, especially the suburbs, which have higher GHG emissions than the inner city. Transit can mitigate that. And the route review offers several options to achieve these goals. TAC members have been informed of the route review process throughout its lengthy development, and we support the proposed options. Brent Bellamy, a Winnipeg urbanist, says you get the city you build. So let's build a city that prioritizes people, that decreases infrastructure spending to support car dependency, that recognizes the GHG benefits of transit, and that increases transportation access to all. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much to all of our presenters and to you, Susan, as well as the chair of our appointed transit committee. We really appreciate that. And Andrea, I think, please forgive me, this is putting me on the spot, but is this your first time delegating to council? I forget.
I think it's the first time I've ever presented.
That's what I meant,
Yeah.
presented.
Yeah,
Well, you did a great job, and I just want to say thank you very much for doing that. At least I wasn't too embarrassed, and you're like, no, this is my 15th time. So thank you very much. That was great. We appreciate it. As I said, we are getting into the delegations now, which we have a few. And so just before I call up the first one, some of the names I recognize, some of them I do not, but we have 5 minutes here for delegations, and I will introduce your name, make sure that you're on the call or on the video as necessary, and then I will let you know to start the delegation. You have no more than the 5 minutes, and I won't interrupt you, but I will have to interrupt you if you do hit the 5-minute mark. And please make sure you stay on the line after your delegation, just in case a colleague or even myself may have a follow-up question for you. And so with that, thank you for choosing to delegate tonight. The first one is, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Shalik Hamad, VP External of the Central Student Association. And I believe you might be joining us on video. I see your name up on the screen. And we'll just see if your video starts for us.
Hello. My Wi-Fi is not great.
Okay.
I'm having some issues even having incoming video, so I'll have to stay video off, unfortunately.
Video off, no problem. Yeah, we can hear you fine. Maybe just, I say this nicely, just speak up a little bit. We're just having a little bit of trouble maybe hearing you. If you could speak up a little bit, we can hear you a bit better. And thank you for joining us. And I will start your time now. Go right ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. It's really exciting to see what Guelph Transit has prepared and what we're looking for in the future. I am curious to see how these routes will benefit the students. I think that it's awesome that the routes are expanding, especially the Express University routes. I am curious to see what ridership will look like when those routes are implemented, as well as the commute buses, like to Aberfoyle and to Kitchener and Cambridge and things like that. I think that'll be really effective. I think I don't have too much to delegate here. I'm really just representing our students, just wanting to make sure that I have this information piece to be able to relay this back to our students to let them know that Guelph Transit is in the works of improving, transit life here in Guelph. So thank you to our transit folks for putting this together, and I look forward to the initiatives in the future.
Okay, well, yeah, and thank you very much for joining us and your representation for the students. We appreciate it. Let's see if there's any follow-up questions to you. And there is not. So thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Next, we have, and I think trying to join us by video is Amelia Meester. And Amelia, I see your name on the screen. Just see if the video pops on for you. Yes, I can see you. Can you hear me and can we hear you? Okay, we can't hear you. Can you just see if the unmute button is there for you?
How does that work for you? Can you hear me now?
So Amelia, oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. It's just my headset doesn't like WebEx, I guess.
Okay, you're coming through pretty great here. So I'm gonna start the timer now for you, and you go right ahead. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for hearing me tonight. I want to start by acknowledging that everyone on council is here because you want to see a more prosperous, healthier, and safer Guelph. And I share in that vision, and that is why I want to ask council to defer acting on the transit route review until a new proposal is created that would increase ridership by an ambitious 50% by 2030, what the 2021 report for the International Transport Workers Federation states is needed to meet a no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius warming target. None of the options presented in the staff report, and especially not the recommended future ready plan, unfortunately offer appropriate frequency or ridership increases to meet the challenges of climate change. In 2019, council debated declaring a climate emergency, and it was voted down because many on council believed the city was on track to do enough to mitigate the worst of climate change. I believe that council tonight can exemplify the climate leadership that you all committed to in 2019 by ensuring this route review is postponed, so an option that meets the goals necessary to prevent catastrophic climate disruption can be created. As I am hoping council knows, the 2018 UN IPCC report stated that the world had until 2030 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% across all sectors, municipalities, countries, and industries to stay under 1.5 Celsius warming. The 2021 IPCC report outlined the severity of failing to meet a less than 1.5 Celsius warming target, which would threaten all life on Earth, including the ability for Earth to sustain a human population. Truly, climate change is the biggest threat that humanity has ever faced. But the good news is that we can be part of mitigating the worst of climate change right now by making investments in mass transit and getting personal vehicles off the road. In a poll done before the federal election this year, 73% of Guelph residents said that Guelph should be a leader on climate change, and ensuring frequent, reliable, and accessible transit in the short term will position Guelph to do that. The economic costs of quickly improving transit and increasing ridership by 50% by 2030 may seem high, but the costs of inaction on climate change are higher. In a 2020 study done by the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, they estimated that the cost of infrastructure upgrades needed for municipalities to weather the worst impacts of climate disruption was $5.3 billion per year. And a different report by the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices found that climate change related events have caused, on average, $112 million in insured damage per event, with the worst event costing upwards of $11 billion. An investment in high frequency, high ridership model will help ensure that Guelph is doing its part to mitigate future economic as well as social, health, and environmental costs associated with climate change, while reducing air pollution, increasing economic development, opening up more tourist opportunities, and keeping our roads safer, faster, and better. I have presented Council tonight with a petition of over 300 names of Guelph residents and visitors of Guelph who are asking for transit with increased frequency of every 3 to 5 minutes on main routes and 10 minutes or less on minor routes, and call for these changes to be made within the short term of 2 to 5 years. The petition also calls for regular routes to outlying areas no longer or never serviced, like Kitchener, Ignatius, Guelph Lake, Cambridge, Fergus, etc., as well as express routes that can help bring people from our suburban neighborhoods, especially the South End, to the downtown GO station to ease commuting times. I urge you as well to read the comments that I provided from the same petition, as they speak to people's concerns with and aspirations for transit in Guelph. I know I'm almost at the 5-minute mark now, so I'll just ask you tonight to side with hundreds of Guelph residents and find a new model that increases ridership by 50% by 2030. Thank you. And I have a couple minutes later. I'm not saying that all the work that was done by the staff wasn't amazing work. I just think we really need to be more ambitious because the climate emergency demands it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amelia. We appreciate that. And yeah, just under the 5 minutes, so well timed. Thank you. Let's see if there's a follow-up question, and there is from Councillor Bell.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So to summarize your ask, you would like to see the high frequency plan implemented in 3 years rather than 6 to 10 years. Is that correct?
I would like to see a more ambitious plan than the high frequency plan. I believe the high frequency plan only had an estimated 17% increase in ridership, and I'm looking for a 50% increase in ridership by 2030. As well for it to be implemented. So yeah, by 2030, so within 8 years rather than 10 years, and a significant increase in ridership rather than, I think it was 17% by 2034, that was in the high frequency plan. What I am asking for is a 50% increase, which is what is necessary in order to prevent catastrophic climate change.
Okay, thank you. That's it for you, Councillor Bell. Great, thank you. Amelia, nothing further as a follow-up. So again, we appreciate your time. Have a good night, okay?
You too.
Thank you. And next is Christopher Grayson Giatto. Yeah, over the phone, I believe.
Hello.
Hi, Christopher. It's Cam. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I hope people
great.
can hear me.
Yeah, you're coming through fine. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm going to start the timer for you right now. Go right ahead.
Sweet. Firstly, apologies for not being on the computer, technical difficulties, but thank you to the clerk for helping me out. Yeah, so I'm Chris. Thank you to everyone for all your hard work for being here and working for us. So I've lived in Guelph for over 5 years, and I'm a PhD candidate in ecological economics at the university. I really love Guelph, and I would happily stay in the area depending on my options after my PhD. Using public transit and cycling to get around is important to me for my health and the health of my local community and the planet. Some of you may even recognize me as the guy who bikes around Guelph with his skis attached to his bike. Super fun, by the way. However, recently I moved to the south of Kitchener for personal reasons. Now, if I want to choose the healthy option for my commute to the university, it can either take 50 minutes by the GO bus, as long as I don't miss my connecting bus with a gap of 5 minutes, or 2 hours. Or the journey would take me an hour and a half by local bus and GO train, again without accounting for any wait time or missing connections. I've actually tried to cycle to the university. Some parts of the route are beautiful, other parts are quite dangerous for cyclists. This whole journey is about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So none of these options are really realistic for me for a regular commute, and so I am forced to drive. So I really hope that alongside boosting local transit within Guelph, I really hope that the City of Guelph can support the Link the Watershed proposal to link the Tri-Cities with Guelph and Brantford with regular bus routes. These bus links would benefit me hugely, obviously. I also know several people who travel between the Tri-Cities and Guelph. These bus links could help people easily choose the healthy travel method. So I want to finish with answering the question of why not use an electric car for getting around. Well, we already know that only switching private fossil fuel cars to electric cars will not solve climate change. The replacement is happening too slow, so our transportation sector will still add greenhouse gases for many, many more years. Furthermore, electric cars still have large embedded emissions from their manufacture. Finally, cars, either fossil fuel or electric, are hugely expensive for both individuals and city governments. The costs for individuals are obvious. City governments have to fork out large amounts of money to maintain the roads and the other infrastructure that supports the urban sprawl that car dependency causes. These costs were just the direct costs of cars. The indirect costs of cars are borne by all of us in the form of reduced productivity and higher healthcare costs. So instead, we can rapidly switch most journeys to active transportation and public transit, improving the economic resiliency of our city, preventing climate change, reducing local air and noise pollution, preventing deaths on our streets, and improving the health and well-being of our communities. So please aim for a higher transit modal share than 13% by providing frequent and plentiful transit routes within Guelph and between the Tri-Cities, Brantford and Guelph. And with that, I thank you all. Thank you all for your service and work.
Thank you very much for calling in. And let me see if there's a follow-up question for you, which I do not see. So thank you again. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Take care. Our next, potentially by video, is Adam Donaldson. And let me see if Adam's name has come up on the screen. And let's see, Adam, if your camera goes on for us.
Oh, yes, it is. I had to allow it. There we go.
Yeah, you're coming through just great, and your audio as well. So thanks for joining us, and you know the drill here, Adam. So I'll start the timer right now for you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. To set the deliberations, or set the table for the deliberations, I just want to lay out the quintessential problem with Guelph Transit as it currently stands. And Andrea alluded to this. It's that it takes too darn long. I want to put the emphasis on that, to travel anywhere. So I want to explain using an example from my own life. There's a South End Community Center that's going to open in the next few years. And to go there as it currently stands with the present transit system, I'm going to lay out exactly step by step how I would get there. So if I want to get to the South End Community Center, or the site of the South End Community Center, by 3 o'clock, I would need to leave my house by 1:15. My neighborhood bus stop is a 4-minute walk from my house. Guelph Transit says you should get to your stop 5 minutes in advance. So the bus gets there at 1:25. If I'm lucky, the bus is prompt, and I take the 15 to 17-minute ride to Guelph Central Station, where I transfer to the number 99 southbound on the number 7 platform. So the 99, if it is on time, will depart Guelph Central Station at 1:45. and go to the University of Guelph. That's a trip that takes between 10 and 12 minutes, but no matter how fast that bus gets to the UC, it won't leave for the rest of its trip until 2 o'clock. So by this point, I have been traveling for 45 minutes. According to the Guelph Transit schedule, the trip from the University Center to the bus stop at Clare and Gordon should take 11 minutes. And I have to say this, and I don't think it's anyone's fault, I have never been on that bus ride and seen it take 11 minutes. It's usually more like 20. But I will split the difference and say it's 15. So that trip is a 15-minute trip, so I'll get there at 2:15. But I still have a 10 to 12-minute walk from that corner to the site of the community center. So the total travel time to get from my home to the South End Community Center location is 70 minutes. I looked at Google Maps. If I were to take a private automobile from my home to that site, it is 15 minutes. So that's my ratio, is 15 to 70. I can get a car and take 15 minutes. I can take transit and take it in 70. But that's a future trip. I want to lay out some of the trips I take regularly. If I want to go to the Smart Center on Woodlawn Road, that's a trip that I take the bus downtown, I transfer to the 99 northbound, but it's a 45-minute trip in total. If I were to use a private car, that's a 10-minute trip. Now I'm lucky. I have 2 ways to get to the Walmart Smart Center on transit. I can take my bus, get off on Imperial Road, wait 20 minutes, transfer to the number 17 Woodlawn Watson bus, but that's not a trip I would take on a rainy day because there's no shelter at the northbound stop. But that is also a trip that takes me 45 minutes. Guelph Transit may be the only transit system where you have 2 different trips to the same location, and it takes you the exact same amount of time, which has got to be in Guinness or something. But it's the same story if I want to go to the Vic Road Rec Center, the Art Gallery of Guelph, the Guelph Grotto Climbing Gym, Guelph General Hospital, Stone Road Mall. All of these locations are 40 to 45 minutes on Guelph Transit when they take 10 or 12 minutes in your car. It just needs to be said explicitly. Those times are only correct if the buses are running without even the most predictable of problems like train crossings, traffic jams, higher than normal passenger counts. And if you miss a bus, that adds 30 minutes to your trip. So, those trips are now taking 75, 90, even 100 minutes. So I just want to make this comparison. The average travel time between Guelph Central Station and Union Station in Toronto is 88 minutes. That's the posted time. So you have to think about it this way. In Guelph, it almost takes you as much amount of time to go from the north end of the city to the south end as it takes you to go from Guelph to Toronto on the train. So I'm not here to advocate for any one map. I'm just here to advocate for the point of view that we just have to do better. We're not going to encourage people to get on transit more when their options are a 15-minute trip in a car and a 70-minute trip on transit, because no one's going to choose the 70-minute trip if they can do it in 15. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Adam, very much for your presentation and the points that you made. I appreciate it. And Council does have one question here for you. Councilor Alt has his hand up.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donaldson. So what I heard you say in your narrative with regards to how long it takes to get anywhere by bus is that you are arguing that currently Guelph Transit is inefficient and therefore is a disincentive to actually using transit to get anywhere effectively. Is that correct?
It's a disincentive if you have an option to not use transit. I think, I think we have a lot of people in this city who have no choice but to take transit. I take transit by choice. I see the way people drive and it frightens me. So I don't want any part of that. I don't want to be part of the problem, if you will. So yeah, if you have the choice between driving your car and taking transit, taking a 15-minute trip or a 70-minute trip, yeah, I don't blame anyone for making that deal. But yeah, it's a disincentive. The inefficiency is a disincentive.
Yeah, and I confess I had to go to my doctor's in almost exactly the same location as you just identified, and I did opt to take my car rather than take transit, despite the fact that it's exactly the same route. However, I am going to put you on the spot, despite the fact that you didn't want to comment on recommendations in front of you. I am going to ask you to comment on the recommendations in front of you and how they compare with the current circumstances you see transit to be in. Do you believe that they will improve the opportunities for people like you who must rely upon transit?
I honestly don't know, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to comment on any specific plan. I mean, this is, let's be clear about something. This is the third realignment in the last 11 or 12 years that we've talked about. I've looked at the previous two realignments and I thought, okay, this is exciting. It really seems like the city's dedicated to changing things up. And the specific example I mentioned to having two ways to go to the Smart Center that take the exact same amount of time. I remember looking at those maps when they were released by transit for public feedback. I guess this was the summer of 13, 14. And I thought, ooh, this is neat. I have two ways I can get to the Smart Center if I want. But then in the practicality, when times were posted and schedules were posted, it turned out it takes the exact same amount of time. So I'm missing some. It's one of these things I won't know until I'm on that bus and taking that route if it's going to change things for me. I hope so, but I can't say right this minute.
So one last question. So I did read your column on transit and what we're looking at tonight, and I guess for me the question that is now raised is, it sounds like your cynicism is based on being disappointed 3 times previously. Is that correct?
The cynicism is systemic, because I mean, it's a promise that's continually made, and it's made at every election. It's made every time we have one of these route alignments that transit's going to get better, and it doesn't. To give you an example, I've lived in the same place where I'm broadcasting from for almost 20 years. When I moved here, it was a 75-minute round trip to the university center and back again. 20 years later, it's a 75-minute round trip. I don't know, Councillor Alt, you tell me. Am I being too cynical?
I'll leave that to you to decide. By the way, Santa Claus takes letters.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Cam.
We appreciate it. Take care and have a good night, okay?
You too.
Barbara Sim, I believe, is next and will be looking to join us by video. Barbara,
Okay.
your name has popped up on the screen and there is your video. Can you speak for me, Barbara?
Yes.
Great, you're coming through audio very clear as well. So thanks for joining us, and I'll start the timer for you right now. Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, my name is Barbara Sim, and good evening to everyone. I do have to acknowledge what the transit management has done in providing these 3 options. But I don't agree with their proposal of going with the Future Ready plan. It's being promoted by the staff as the best option. The staff were given a constraint. Instead of looking at a vision of increasing ridership to 40%, 50%, whatever they thought the vision should be, they were told to keep the costs down. That does not get you a good transit system. So I do not support the Future Ready option. Changing to a grid system is, I hope, will be much better than the spoken wheel that we have now. However, it does not provide enough frequency to attract new riders and to get some of the existing car drivers to switch to public transportation. Driving a car, walking and cycling will always be a part of our economy and always be part of the modal split. However, increasing the modal share of public transit provides the greatest economic benefits to the city. A Leger poll in 2019 showed that 86% of urban Canadians think that their governments need to spend more on public transportation. 80% think that reducing travel time must become the highest priority. None of the plans being presented tonight really address that issue. The world is changing, and Guelph must modernize to stay competitive. Public transit is an investment in future prosperity and plays an important part in the role of minimizing the cost of congestion and maximizes economic productivity. Having a frequent transportation system that meets the needs of the community and the region makes that an attractive place for economic investment. Guelph is a growing city. To remain a growing city and to handle the intensification of population that is in the provincial plans, we need to modernize. For every dollar invested in public transit, there's a range of between $3 and $5 of economic benefit to the community and region. How much this economic benefit is depends on the frequency and coverage of the transit system. Not only does public transit reduce overall fuel consumption, it reduces air and environmental pollution, which in turn reduces the amount of greenhouse gases and the cost of healthcare. We also reduce premature deaths. The other objection to the proposed plan is delaying the interregional transit to 2025. We do not have interregional transit now. Greyhound is gone. It is a benefit to the employees that live in Guelph and work in Kitchener that they have some other way to get there than their private cars. Because I'm sorry, we're not going to spend 2 to 3 hours going each way. There's a proposal called Link the Watershed, which could get pilot funding, not cost the city. And that funding is available from the federal and provincial governments. And we could commence operations in 2022. The benefits to the citizens of Guelph are less congestion on the highways between Guelph and Waterloo Region and Brantford, connecting an area as large as the province of PEI. It's a growing economic region. Allowing employers in Guelph to attract employees from the other parts of the region that may have specialized skills that Guelphites don't have. And also Guelphites with specialized skills having a broader economic area to be able to sell their skills. It reduces the need for a second and third car, which reduces parking problems, especially as Guelph will increase the population as it grows. It will attract more economic investment to an already growing, vibrant city. There are a lot of economic reasons beyond climate change. We do have to try to get to 1.5%. So I do not agree with the Future Ready plan. I hope the council at the minimum would consider going with the high frequency plan.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to interrupt you just over the 5-minute mark there. So I gotta unfortunately stop you, but let me just thank you first of all for joining us, and let me see if there's a follow-up question for you. Councillor Hofflin has a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, through you, Mayor Guthrie. Barbara, I didn't hear your last sentence. So you said you don't support the Future Ready, and at a minimum, council should consider the high frequency plan. Is that what I understood?
Yes, that is.
Thank you.
Great, and that's it, Barbara. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care. Next is also by video, we hope, Eleanor Ross. And let's see if Eleanor can pop on the screen. Your name has come on the screen. So we'll just see if the video comes on. Yes, we see you as well, Eleanor. Hello, can you just check your audio for us?
Hi there, can you hear me?
You're coming through both on video and audio. That's great. Thank you, Eleanor, for delegating tonight. We really appreciate it. So let me mute and you can start right now. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eleanor Ross. I was born in Guelph, and although I say that with pride, I mention it to establish that I am a simple citizen with a long history in this city. There has never been a time when there was a great bus service in Guelph. 35 years ago, the curfew for my teenagers was to be on the last bus home from downtown. It left at 11:15 p.m. I was amazed when I recently learned that the last bus now leaves downtown at around 12:15 a.m. Only a 1-hour extension in 35 years. and apparently no plans to change this for the next 10 years. In 2017, the bus service to the east, north, and west of the city was gutted in order to dump all the resources into the south end. The 99 mainline bus was introduced with 10-minute frequency and neighborhood buses feeding into it, and it worked. Ridership expanded enormously along this corridor, while unfortunately ridership in the rest of the city shrank as anyone who could bought a car. This new plan is a good place to start. It needs to be expanded and improved until it truly meets the needs of the bus riding public. Not in 10 years, but starting now. This is a golden opportunity to truly meet riders' needs. In fact, this very report states that when asked what would encourage you to take transit more, 19% of people said expanded hours of operation and 33% said more frequent buses. That is 52% of the responses that have not been addressed in this plan. Why not? I believe we need a massive attitude adjustment to how we look at bus service in Guelph. We are looking at it completely backwards. First, we start with bad numbers from a current system that does not work. If we plan to build a functional, reliable, usable transit system, we cannot start from behind. The saying says, if you build it, they will come. First, you put out a good system, like the 99, and then people will ride. This is already proven. Don't start with dismal numbers from a poor system. Start with what you want to achieve, and then build the system to get it. The bus system is constantly nickeled and dimed. We are building a $100 million main library that will never generate a return on that money with no questions asked. It will serve a few hundred people downtown while a transit system serves thousands all over town. We spend millions building bike lanes with no usage monitoring or cost justification whatsoever. There is no return on that money. The bike lobby is well organized and made up of people who are used to making presentations and influencing council. Bus riders, on the other hand, are just hardworking people who are trying to keep their heads above water, the disadvantaged, the disabled, and the elderly. They have neither the time nor the expertise to make fancy presentations to council. Over and over again, when transit advocates are asked to justify the cost of providing a workable bus service for these people who are not riding the buses as a lifestyle choice, but as an absolute necessity of their everyday lives. I have a friend who works at a plant on Woodlawn Road. His shift ends at midnight. He can get downtown by riding 2 buses that takes about 40 minutes, but at that point, he is stranded as there are no more buses running. Now he has to take a taxi the last mile home. He could have been home in 10 minutes with a car. Trust me, he's looking. This plan has not changed that, will not change that for the next 10 years, if then. That, I believe, is a travesty. There seems to be no consideration for shift workers in this plan or even manufacturing in general. No indication of the importance of these plants to our city. There is a suggestion that corporations be asked to pay to have a bus pick up their workers. What a great way to drive industry away from Guelph. I am sure that Cambridge or even Brantford will welcome them with no such levy. And by this reasoning, I guess we should charge the university to have buses to get their students to class. I believe the whole process is backwards. You, ladies and gentlemen, were elected to create a vision for the city of Guelph, to build a city with input from the citizens of Guelph, a city that will meet their needs, a city that will meet their dreams. That is your power and yours alone. John F. Kennedy said we will put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. He did not say how. He had the vision. It was up to others to figure out how. You need to lead this city with your vision. We can have a bus system that compete with the car, and we can start to have it in weeks, not years. There is no need to wait for electric buses or new operating campus. The grid plan is good. Extend the hours, add frequency, and it is excellent. Hours can be extended almost immediately. Start with 1 hour. Run an express bus down the Hanlon to the South Industrial section, go around both sides of Laird, run it back at each shift change. This could be done in weeks. Don't wait to create this grid system. Start now and do it as soon as possible. The ridership will increase staggeringly. Let staff figure out how to do it. I am sure they can. You need to mandate the vision, a true vision of a transit system that compete with a car. You need to realize that you and you alone have the power to make this happen. Please use it. Thank you.
And thank you, Eleanor, for calling in and with your presentation. We appreciate it. Let me see if there's a follow-up for you, which I don't think there is. No, but again, thank you so much. It's a good to see you here. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And next we have Scott Frederick.
Oh,
and I think joining us by phone, I believe. And can you hear me okay, Scott?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through just fine.
Okay,
So let
good.
me just reset my clock here, and you go right ahead.
Okay. So I hope everyone has read the written submissions, because I'm not going to read mine, but I will expand on a couple of points. So I did read everyone's submission, and I'm going to give a big +1 to all, and also the previous delegates. I'm in agreement with the points that everyone has made. Everyone likes transit. In particular, the points made by several commentators that money spent on transit has an economic return of 2 to 3 times, and the increasing frequency leads to increasing ridership, which is key to achieving our climate and modal split goals. I think a big part of the historic lackluster support for transit by council is due to the idea that supporting transit is a necessary evil that has to be provided at taxpayers' expense in order to benefit the minority of citizens that cannot afford to run a car. This attitude relies on the assumption that car driving is the normal mode of transportation and that transit is only used if cars are not available. In fact, as our housing density increases, as it must, for environmental and social reasons, and by legislative requirement, our reliance on transit must increase. There simply won't be space for as many cars in our not too distant future. In the late 70s and early 80s, I lived in downtown Toronto, and I had a license to drive, but never had a car. I didn't need one because I could get anywhere I needed to go on frequent and efficient public transit. Now, many years later, one of my kids lives there. He's an example of millennial and later generations that doesn't have a license, doesn't drive, has no plans to ever drive because she has access to frequent, efficient public transit, and now grade separated bike lanes. Her neighborhood is quite close to my old neighborhood. And the difference between 40 years ago and now is that now there are fewer car lanes. There are more bike lanes and more bike traffic because there are more bike lanes. Sadly, there's not much more transit. The frequency is about the same, but it's just more crowded now. So as we densify our downtown neighborhoods and our intensification corridors, we're essentially bringing downtown Toronto to us. And as we do this, we'll need to adapt by building better transit infrastructure and reducing the infrastructure that we devote to cars. We can see this start to happen already as developers ask and are granted reduced parking levels. They're mainly doing this to reduce costs, but they wouldn't do it if they didn't know that they could sell the units with less parking. There's a connection between parking and transit. As parking goes down, transit must go up. And if there's time, I'll come back to this point. So when I go to work, sometimes I drive, sometimes I ride transit, and sometimes I carpool. And when I carpool, I collect stories, and a lot of these stories are about transit. One person I carpool with used to take the old 16th Southgate when it was an end run from Central Station. He was visually impaired, so she couldn't drive, but could work only using the accommodations that are built into software. She used to ride from the East End, transfer at Central Station, and get to work in about 35 minutes. When the routes were changed, the number 16 began at Clare and Gordon. This changed a 2-bus, 1 transfer trip into a 3-bus, 2 transfer trip with an additional layover at University Centre, which the 99 made, but the old 16 didn't. So her 35-minute commute now took nearly an hour on a good day. So she quit that job and got another one downtown, reducing her commute to 1 bus ride. On the face of it, this is not a problem. She's doing fine, but her old employer, as many employers do, tried to see if instead of replacing her, they could get her former coworkers to work a little harder and a little faster. And that worked, and the employer just got a little more profitable. The City of Guelph permanently lost a skilled, well-paying, clean job, the kind of job we want more of and not less of. That's one less person paying taxes and contributing to the local economy. It's a permanent job lost directly attributable to a degradation of transit service. Not only that, but now ridership has been reduced, leading to future reduced
Hi, Scott. I'm
service.
sorry to interrupt, but that's your 5 minutes. I
Okay.
have to interrupt you there. I'm very sorry. So let me just see if there's a follow-up. Let me just see if there's a follow-up here for you. And Councillor Salisbury has one question for you. Go ahead, Councillor Salisbury.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor. At the beginning of your presentation, you made reference to a lackluster support of transit, and I'm just curious as to why you feel that way.
Because I think what we have now is not adequate. We need to build transit now for the future. You need to have the transit, good, efficient, frequent transit, so that people want to move to it. And other delegations have made that point.
No, I would totally agree with that. Although that's looking forward, and I would think when you reference sort of a lackluster support for transit, you were speaking more to a systemic or past problem or perception that you had of our support of transit. I'm just curious as to where that's coming from.
Well, I've been at other meetings and seen people vote against expanding routes and against spending more money.
Okay.
You can't vote for. Okay.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Scott, again for calling in and delegating. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, take care. All right, we've got two more left here, Council. Ali versus Louis. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, and I'm sorry if I'm not. Ali is also joining us by phone, and can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through great. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me just reset my clock, and you can go right ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie and members of council. Some of you know me already, but for those of you that don't, hi, I'm Ali. I'm a librarian at the University of Guelph. I lived in the city for 6 years as a renter and a homeowner, as a car owner and a pedestrian, as a young and able-bodied person who's firmly middle class. You might be wondering why I thought it was important to give context for who I am and what my life looks like. I did so because I agree with transit expert Stephen Higginschide. Politicians and decision makers across North America mostly don't take the bus. And because they don't take the bus, they tend to conceive of both the bus and its riders in ways that rely on stereotypes and outdated planning ideas. As Higginschide notes in his book, Better Buses, Better Cities, which I challenge each member of council to read, and don't worry, GPL has a copy you can borrow, bus riders, whether they are actual or potential, are not just poor people with no alternatives. They are not just people who use the bus to get to work. They are not just people who need to be convinced to take the bus by making it sexy by providing Wi-Fi or being on demand like Uber. Every person is a bus rider, or perhaps more accurately, every person could be. As Higginschide points out, more people choose buses when they are a useful option for them, when it's reasonably fast, affordable, and convenient. Decades of research by academics and public agencies show that this is determined mostly by factors such as how often the bus runs, how fast it is compared with alternatives, how reliable it is, and how safe riders feel. I bring up this passage because with the exception of safety, as a regular bus rider, I rarely experience frequency, speed, or reliability when taking Guelph Transit. I can't begin to count the number of times that I've been on a bus that has gone out of service halfway through my trip suddenly and without warning, or the number of times that I arrived at a stop 5 minutes early just to find out that the bus had already come and gone, and the delay that I experienced waiting for the next bus made me miss a connection, or the number of times that I diligently saved a transfer back in the day when we had paper transfers, and the window expired before I could use it because the timing of the routes I was taking didn't sync up, or the number of times that a particular route had been suddenly canceled with no reason given, something that has happened with increasing regularity during the pandemic. But all of those experiences pale in comparison to the number of times that I have almost gotten hit crossing the road at a marked intersection with the walk sign up in broad daylight. My partner and I chose to get rid of our car 2.5 years ago. but this so-called progressive green city tests our resolve to remain carless nearly every day. Past choices have been made around the council horseshoe have created a city that is actively hostile to both pedestrians and transit users. And some of the other folks before me have illustrated how that's the case. In doing so, many residents have been forced down the path of car ownership simply to ensure that they can live their lives. And I know I'm not alone in these challenges. Again, previous delegations have spoken to some of these things, but as recently as November 2019, Councillor Alt had to abandon a resident's challenge to take transit every day for a week. If you'll recall, this was because he had to be in too many places and the constraints of our public transit system were insurmountable. If a resident who lives downtown in close proximity to the transit hub can't get around on the bus for a part-time job over the course of 7 days, that's a pretty damning indictment of how impossible the transit option is for the majority of people in the city. Of the three options being presented to council tonight, the high frequency plan is the only one that comes even remotely close to where the city of Guelph needs to go. To be clear, I don't think this plan is anywhere as brave or ambitious as it should be, not only because it and both of the other options presented are based on an extremely small amount of data collected during a pandemic when many people's attention was understandably elsewhere, but also because we are firmly entrenched in dual crises of both climate and affordability. But it's a start. I urge council to be bold and to select the high frequency plan, which just tonight was declared to be the option most closely aligned with public feedback. Any other choice will be a disservice to the current and future needs of our city. Thank you for your time.
And thank you very much for choosing to delegate tonight. We appreciate it, Ali. Let me just see if there's a follow-up question. And there is not. So thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. And last, we have Stephen Petrick, the chair of the Transit Action Alliance of Guelph, their own group, not to be confused with the council-approved group. But we thank Stephen for joining us, I think by phone. Can you hear me, Stephen?
I can hear you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yep, coming through great. I'm just going to reset my clock, and you know the drill. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. First, I want to acknowledge that the board of directors and the members of the Transit Action Alliance sent you correspondence as well as fact sheets, and today some maps showing how different frequencies and travel times would improve transit. I also want to acknowledge and thank Guelph Transit staff. They've worked very hard on this plan, and they have brought forward some very strong route changes that are essential to making the system more attractive. What if Guelph Transit could spur economic investment and improve the environment? What if it could dramatically improve Guelphites' access to jobs, schools, and services all over the city? And what could it have, the social environmental benefits as well, with minimal investment. We need to be investing. In fast transit and frequent transit. People don't like to wait. Each of the delegates that you heard tonight from Amelia about the climate change and the fact that the C40 is asking us to double our ridership by 2030. From the regional transit needs, as our region is going to be growing to over 1 million plus people by 2034. From Adam's travel journeys, which if you look at our email today, you'll see some comparisons of 15-30 splits. From Ali about thinking differently. From Scott about not having enough space for cars and that EVs are not necessarily the only solution. From Eleanor, who has asked for you guys to have a vision for our transit system and to move things forward faster. From Barb talking about the economic spin-offs. Every dollar investment has up to $5 in economic spin-off. That's essential. If we go with a future ready plan, we're taking away money from local businesses. Do you want to answer the local businesses in the community next year? At the end of the day, the high frequency plan is it's close, but it's not as ambitious as it could be. frequency has been mentioned as the #1 way to grow transit. When you look at how Brampton went from 5 million riders with a city size of about 215,000 people in the mid-90s to growing its ridership 4 times higher than their growth rate of their city, which was about 2.2% per year for about 5 years, that's what we need. We need to get not just the riders that need transit, we need to get those discretionary riders onto transit as well. And the proposals are not as attractive as they could be to getting those riders on board. If we don't start acknowledging that and start looking at that more, we're going to be left behind. As a city, I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be in the challenge having other regions next to us getting more jobs and more people. I want our city to prosper just like everyone else. Without a revolution in public transit, you'll miss the bus on tackling climate change, and time is running out. It's time that we invest in public transit right now. There's so much we can reap in the rewards of good jobs, improved fairness in access to mobility, and lock in reductions in transport emissions at a pace and scale we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. Very much appreciated. And let me see if there's a follow-up for you. And I do see Councillor O'Rourke has a question for you. Go right ahead, Councillor.
Hi, Mr. Frederick. First, I really appreciate tax submission. And I think there's a lot of things in the letter that you submitted that Guelph Transit can consider in terms of the length of the transfer time and those types of things. But I just wanted to know if you'd had a chance to look at not the staff presentation, but the document itself and how they're going to calibrate up on frequency or down on frequency, depending on that last hour of boarding, and whether you feel that that's a good tool to kind of make the future ready option scalable, sort of quickly scalable. If there's a route that's really popular, they could easily increase the frequency on that. Did that resonate with you at all?
Service standards are essential, yes. But if you don't have a good product out there, you're not going to get the ridership. That's the problem. That's the disconnect of it is, people want frequent transit. 15 minutes or better is the industry standard. It's in numerous documents, which we've shared with you. Guelph Transit knows this. And, that's kind of the standard that people will not look at a schedule. So the service standard should, if we leave it at the future ready plan, more than likely we'll be going down, not up.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Frederick, so I'm originally from Ottawa. I've lived in Halifax, lived in Toronto, took transit there all the time. But I mean, they did have rush hour frequencies and then it dropped down and then it picked up again at rush hour. So how many mid-sized cities would really be able to have the population to support the type of frequency you're talking about?
Guelph Transit had 15-minute service in 2012. The city of Guelph had 20-minute service the following year. The only reason it failed was because we didn't have enough buses. The routes were not very well designed at the time. And, it just backfired because there wasn't a customer service manager to manage any of that, something that this plan doesn't even mention, or customer service strategies. When you look at Halifax, they went to a frequent transit system. When you look at Kingston, they've also went to a 15-minute frequent transit system. Their ridership has grown. Kingston was mentioned, I believe. Burlington is also shifting its system into a more frequent network system. So there are cities that are similar to us that have done it successfully. And our city is growing and is growing very quickly, almost at the same pace that Brampton was growing at. And we need a system that is attractive and frequent to grow the ridership. And by no means will it happen overnight. It will take some time, but we need to give a good system at the beginning. It's no longer chicken and the egg. You have to get a good, attractive system out there first and foremost. Otherwise, nobody's going to ride it. There's going to be 20,000 more cars, and we're all going to be looking at this in 10 years from now and going, what happened?
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks again, Stephen. And don't go anywhere, Councillor Gibson. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Petrick, thanks very much for your delegation. I do feel, though, that we're talking about one half of the equation here. So I heard from almost every delegate, frequency is how you build a good transit system. I don't disagree. But there's two ways to pay for that, right? So in every municipal situation where you've got subsidized public transit, I think in Toronto, I think it's quoted as $2 from the taxpayer, $2 from the rider, right? 50% subsidized. I think we're at about 50 to 60% subsidized here in Guelph now. So what is the threshold for the rider in Guelph? Let's just factor out the affordable bus pass situation. Let's account for middle class, well earners that can afford to pay. What is the threshold for ridership in Guelph to do a full cost recovery on ridership? Is it $6 a ride? Because frequency comes at a cost, and we have to place that cost somewhere. So can you help me understand the threshold for the rider?
Climate change has a much bigger impact. Economic impact has a much larger impact. Not having those jobs available in our city has a larger impact. The pollution costs have a larger impact. The healthcare costs have a larger impact. A small investment, like we said, every dollar invested has a $5 spin-off.
So we're going to reduce subsidization of cars, which I don't disagree with. And we're going to boost ridership on transit through frequency, but we could increase frequency. So let's just move to the future ready state, or let's move to TAG's suggestion and go to 50-minute service across the city. What threshold do the TAG riders have for paying for that increased cost?
The fare strategy, which hasn't been completed, will help define that, for one. And in terms of the RC ratio, that of course that needs to be discussed as part of the fare strategy. So I can't really answer it until I have the answer from professional staff.
Well, I will ask that question to staff next. I know the answer. The answer is there is no threshold for increasing the cost of transit. It will drive transit riders down. But I'll ask that question to staff.
I disagree, but that's your opinion.
Okay, we'll stop it at that. And Stephen, thank you so much again for delegating and joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, everyone, that's it for our delegations. And so we thank all of them. And yes, there was correspondence as well attached. So thank you for that as well, who sent in correspondence. Some of it was directly connected to the delegations. So thank you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 recommendations. Would anyone like to consider putting them on the floor at least for us? Councillor Alt and Councillor Hoffman is seconding. Thank you so much. Let's go tonight. I feel like we can do questions and comments at the same time. Okay. So again, with the biggest chunk of this being referred to budget. Just remember that, okay, everybody. We don't have to get into a mindset of having to have big prolific things about everything here tonight. We could save that a little bit for December the 2nd. And I see Councillor Alt's hand up, so go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. I was happy to put the motions on the floor because regardless which motions, which plan might be approved tonight, I think what we are looking at is something that is fairly forward-looking. So first of all, I'll ask my questions, and I'll ask them broadly to staff because I'm not certain which staff should necessarily be answering them. It might be Mr. Garreau, it could be Ms. Michaela, it could be Ms. Clack, but the first one really does stem from one of the delegates, and that's Mr. Donaldson. So wondering if staff could please comment on Mr. Donaldson's assertion that current travel times are in disincentive to developing ridership.
And just so transit staff know, whoever can answer any of these questions, just unmute and start answering the question. Okay, don't look to me to try to figure out who's going to do it. So if a question comes at you, whoever knows the answer, just unmute and go right ahead and start answering, okay? So that person right now will be, okay, again, just unmute and start going. Go for it.
Through the mayor to Councillor Out. So currently, yes, the current travel times are a disincentive to using the transit network when you have a quicker alternative. The intention of the new system is that a lot of routes are crosstown routes. You're not required to transfer downtown. You can make that direct trip from east to west, from north to south on one bus potentially. And we have done our analysis as well that there are a lot more alternatives, a lot more routing alternatives for existing trips within the city.
I don't know if you know this yet or not. Are we able to estimate what the impact might be on ridership as a consequence of reducing those transfers? Right now, what I'm hearing you saying is the potential exists to go from point A to point B with maybe 0 transfers or maybe 1. So I'm just wondering if we have any capacity to gaze into the future of a grid system and its effectiveness on ridership.
Through the mayor, I'm pretty sure there are certain, it's called elasticity. I'm pretty sure there is a metric for that, but I don't know exactly what it is offhand.
It's fine. I'm not surprised. I think it's something that is very elastic. I was wondering if also staff could comment on Ms. Meester's assertion that we must do it now, that we must increase ridership 50% and not in 10 years. Is that something that had been considered, is possible to be considered, or must we look at things being done in an exponential fashion, increasing over 10 years or so?
Through the mayor, we are taking a somewhat cautious approach given the impacts that COVID has had on our ridership. But if it is something that council directs us to do, Guelph Transit would be in support of any expediting or increases.
It's probably 2 questions in one right now, and perhaps it's to you, Ms. McHale. You seem to be on the hot seat right now. What are the downsides of doing nothing, and can Guelph afford to sustain the current system, or are we facing a population crunch that will just make this system more inefficient and more ineffective?
So through the mayor, maybe I'll start while Andrew's pulling up some information here. I think in a sort of strategic way, doing nothing has impacts across many other facets of our strategic plan. And so as you heard me say at the beginning, the do nothing option is of course an option for council to consider, but doing nothing for transit means that we then would need to collectively come back and revisit a number of our other targets related to climate change and active transportation. Even when you get into discussions about things like parking, as you were discussing the other evening, all of that ties back to we can't reach any of those targets if we don't move our transit system along and develop and grow our transit system. And so I think it's hard to take that out of the holistic picture of our strat plan. I really do think that you need to look at it holistically, and recognizing tonight we've kind of pulled it out, but when you come back at budget, we're then going to ask you as a council to look at this holistically. So I think our opinion as staff, and others can jump in if they disagree, but I think our opinion as staff and certainly as the executive team is that the do nothing option, while of course that is an option for council, that has sweeping implications across many of the other plans and facets of our strat plan. And I'll stop there and see if there's anybody else who wants to jump in or if they feel I've captured it.
Yes, through the mayor, we did have our consultant look at what would happen if we didn't proceed with a route redesign at all. They found that we would have a much slower recovery of our ridership and revenue as a result of the pandemic. And we would also have a larger proportion of our ridership that we would never recover. This would not work in our favor as the transit network is not growing with the city and could not be future ready. And this, yes, as Colleen alluded, we would not be able to meet many of the goals of our strategic plan.
And if I can just also then.
Thanks to both of you for that. Can I just follow up with one small question, or maybe it's a large one? It strikes me that one of the challenges that we have is density in Guelph, and that density is going to increase, and that's going to have an impact on people on the roads and people in various neighborhoods. I don't know, I'm not an expert on transit, but it just seems to me to be intuitive that that's going to be the case. Are we looking at density leading to potential increases in traffic that we must address before we do potentially risk in some shape or form things like gridlock?
So I think maybe Mr. Garris wants to jump in here to respond to that.
To the Mayor, Councillor Alt, yes, I wanted to mention a couple things. Density plays a big role as we monitor and watch how our changes regarding to our future ready plan evolve. We have one of the important features of it is that we've now embedded service standards. Service standards will dictate to us at the exact times when we make those very, very important decisions that are going to help us trigger towards increasing our transit and building ridership. And it's going to solidify the decision-making processes that we have in place, understanding that those triggers within the service standards will certainly provide us with the knowledge that we need to make those decisions to help in terms of density and the options and frequencies for the trips for our customers.
And our Deputy CAO, Jane Holmes, would like to jump in on this too.
Thank you.
That was the next person I was going to ask a question to.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Alt, as we have a look at a lot of population coming to our city, as mentioned by some of the delegates, and we have to think about how those additional residents are going to be moving around our city. If they all bring their car, whether it be electric or not, that's certainly going to add to the congestion on our streets. So it is, it's all, when you think about our streets, we think about those being the spines of our city and how we want them to develop, how we want them to look, and how we want them to be developed for all users. And so again, if every one of those people who are going to be coming to our city are going to bring their car, that's not going to leave enough room for active transportation, for pedestrians, or any kind of streetscaping. So the more we can have people move their travel, some of their trips to transit, the better off our city will be.
Ms. Holmes, I'm just going to follow up on that one. I don't know whether you're the person to ask this to, or whether there's any finance staff that can, but when we're dealing with issues of infrastructure, such as streets and so on, I'm also looking at cost benefit analysis. It strikes me that, and maybe it's Mr. Garou who can answer this one, but it strikes me that getting people out of cars and into transit actually has a positive impact on the cost of road development and road maintenance. And that's why I'm not certain whether I would ask you, Ms. Holmes, or Mr. Garris, or somebody else.
I'm sorry, Councillor Alt, I don't have any information on that.
For the Mayor, to Councillor Alt, I can just add that I agree with what you're saying. There is cost benefits that take place. I'm not an expert on exactly what those cost benefits are. I can tell you that some of the decisions that we make in transit are certainly going to provide us with what we need to encourage and to get people out of the cars in terms of the density. And ultimately, that's what our plan wants to accomplish. We want to get more people out of their cars onto transit by giving them appropriate choices to take for their transit needs.
And if I can just jump in there and add that this is part of the transportation master plan work, it's very, very difficult to quantify. And so we don't have a direct answer for you on the cost benefit analysis is X, but that is part of the broader transportation master plan work and what staff, of course, are considering. So it's difficult to quantify, but definitely part of those broader conversations that we're having.
Guthrie, as I said, I am quite supportive of moving forward with transit. I don't know which particular proposal I would consider to be the best at this point, so I might return to some concluding remarks at the end of this question and answer period.
Okay, or again, the three options in front of us, or a fourth could always be brought up during the budget presentation where your comments could be made there if you wish. Councillor Hoffland, Salisbury, Gawler, O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. The 2% modal split, it's not, in my view, it's not that significant, but it's not necessarily about just the modal split. I'm sure that there would be a huge increase in trips. Is that a correct assumption?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hoffland, that is correct.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the community engagement. So tonight we heard, I don't know how many delegates, but most of them were speaking to the high frequency plan. Staff are recommending the future ready plan. Can staff speak a little bit about the public engagement? What I'm wondering is, were there three options offered? Because in the comments from staff, it says that the future ready aims to incorporate the key feedback from the public. So I'm just curious if there were choices, or did the answers bring you to future ready?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hoffland, essentially the answers from feedback is what led us to these three different options. And so, yes, I believe that was the question, right?
Yeah, that was it. So that brought you back to three options. Okay. And I want to know, I need to be crystal clear what I know I'm approving. I'm going to go with the staff recommendation, but I'm sending it, of course, to budget, and then hopefully we're not going to have too long of a discussion at budget after we have our questions answered this evening. But what am I adding to the 3.93? I don't know if anyone from finance is here, but our budget is coming in, including the hospital, at 3.93. Am I adding 1.26 if I go with the future ready plan, or am I adding 0.67? I want to have a number so that when I go into budget, I know where we're starting. And that number, I would like that number to be accurate.
Through the mayor, if I maybe can suggest Greg Clark, I think is available, and I hope I'm not putting him on the spot to suggest that if we bring Greg in, he might be able to help with that.
Ms. Cockbush, while we're waiting, may I ask another question of you? Okay. The other question I have is about the ICIP projects. I heard staff say that the ICIP projects would need to be reviewed. Would they need to be reviewed if we didn't do option 1, option 2, or option 3?
So through the mayor to Councillor Hoffland, Greg can also probably help with that as well. And so not to keep making everything hang on, poor Greg. But yes, the and if Greg's not available, I think Tara Baker is available and can jump in. But yes, so the ICIP funding is predicated on proceeding with the staff recommended future ready. As to the impact of if we switched from that recommended to one of the other options, I'm hopeful somebody else is able to jump in. Sorry if I sound like I'm filling time, but I kind of am, because I think we need someone from finance to help us with this.
Thank you.
Some good delay work there, Deputy CAO.
Yeah.
How was your day
Here we
today?
go. I see Greg's name on
Oh,
screen.
don't answer us, please. Greg's here.
Sorry about that, Council, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hoffland. So to answer your first question, the impact in 2022 is 1.26%, and that includes both the operating impacts of the Transit Action Plan and the capital funding required to implement all of the projects that go along with that, and then 0.45 in 2023. That's what would be added to the two figures that are presented for those years in the budget currently. And then the second question about ICIP. So the projects that we have approved for ICIP are based on expanding the transit system through additional buses, the new facility downtown for servicing the needs of transit customers, building a new transit facility out at Dunlop Street to maintain and keep the fleet stored and ready to go each day, as well as the electrification of existing fleet. So the main projects that would need some reconsideration would be the first three. So obviously the expansion of the fleet, that facility downtown, and the overall size of the facility required out at Dunlop would have to be reconsidered based on council's direction coming out of this, because one of the parameters of the ICIP program is that we meet certain targets in terms of growth of ridership and modal share. The investment from the federal and provincial governments is intended to see transit increase those metrics, and so we'd want to make sure that whatever we move forward actually is able to achieve what the ICIP program is expecting, and that we could enter into an agreement with the government that we could achieve and meet our obligations through whatever investment we ended up making.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for checking in with us. So I just want to be clear again about the 1.26, because tomorrow we're going to be listening to budget, of course, and we're going to go away and we'll have a lot to think about. So I guess I would like to know from staff, is the 1.26 everything or nothing? So this plan doesn't have pieces where council can say, well, only electrify 10 buses, don't do 30 buses, or only hire 50 people. We can't delve into those details. At least this is what I'm hoping, but it's all at 1.26, or we go to another plan, or we do status quo. Would that be a fair statement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hoffland, as the program's been designed and what transit has brought back to you, and in terms of the costing and the budget impact, that is the intention, is that we've brought forward a plan and a strategy that implemented over a 7-year period would see the expected outcomes in terms of ridership and all those types of things. And so that is what's tied to the 1.26%. One of the other things to consider is that if none of these options are approved, there are still requirements and needs at transit to continue operating the system. So that is what's been identified as well as those optional impacts. If we don't do any of these strategies, then we would be looking for those staffing positions to be approved so that we can continue to operate the system as is and properly staffed and supervised and all those types of things.
Again, thank you, Greg. So I'm going to close by saying that I think there's, there's 3 choices. We can do status quo, we can expand routes in a system that's not efficient, nor will it attract more ridership, or we can go with the staff recommendation and look at addressing climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and addressing the modal split. And I know we're not approving actually the funding, but I'm happy to move forward with the staff recommendation and send it to budget.
Thanks, Councillor Hoffman. Salisbury, Gawler, O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I want to start with just understanding that I've been a transit supporter since I first ran on a platform of improving transit in this community a number of terms ago. And I mean, I've had family and friends that were transit drivers, so I'm really familiar with transit. And I think that Councillor Gibson has sort of touched on something that is critical, and I want to ask a question about the fare strategy, because one of the delegates also referenced the fare strategy. I've always been a believer that the threshold for the cost to take a ride on transit was a huge determining factor on whether on uptake of our transit, and that the holy grail has always been frequency. But there's a balance between there, because we can have incredible frequency and a high price, or a high price and great frequency. That balance, that question I didn't see answered. I saw it deferred, and I'm just questioning how we arrive at some of these decisions without that critical understanding of what that balance is.
To the mayor, Councillor Salisbury, I'll start, and my transit staff can jump in if they want. The fare strategy is a very important component. Obviously, there's a cost to doing business, and everybody, I believe, respects that. And depending on the type of business that we want to provide for our customers and for the residents of Guelph, we have to take a deep look at what that balance is. And that balance involves the decision-making processes in terms of what kind of transit are we going to provide. Is it going to be high frequencies? Is it going to be a combination of on-demand type transit, microtransit options, and or just a normal low frequency or extended service that gets people from point A to point B? The better frequencies that you have, obviously you're going to attract a better customer base that's going to fundamentally be using your transit system daily and more often, and it's going to grow riderships. But there is a balance to it. There's a cost to doing business, and we have to look to see what that balance is with what we're providing. And that balance is what we have to take a deep look at during our fare strategy that needs to be looked at, and in terms of the best decision processes for the residents of the city of Guelph and the customer base that will depend on Guelph Transit for the future.
Thank you for that. I don't know if anyone else wanted to speak.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney. Saw you jumping. Go right ahead. Yep.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Guthrie. In transit, it's common practice that for every 1% you increase fares, you will see a decrease in fare and ridership of approximately 0.5%. So it's not a straight calculation of increasing fares by X and you'll get X more revenues. So there's other factors that you have to consider. So part of the fare strategy would be timing fare increases linked to increase in services to help decrease the impact to the ridership and the revenue.
I think the three of Mr. Mayor, I think the challenge I'm facing is when we're talking about accelerating frequency beyond the staff recommendation, as many of the delegates have spoken about, it brings to mind the question of our ratios and affordability, and the offset potential of paying for that increased frequency with higher fares. It just seems that we haven't done the work necessary to fully understand that balance between an accelerated rollout, increased frequency, and perhaps the offsetting increased fare strategy for the consumer to facilitate that. So it makes it difficult to enter into that conversation. I'm just wondering if there's any comments about that that would sort of help help me balance what I'm hearing from some of the delegates tonight, for instance, with that fair strategy. Is there a way to accelerate that so that we at least have the information available to us?
Through the mayor to Councillor Salisbury. Again, it becomes very important, your fair strategy in terms of the kind of service that we offer. And there's a balance on how far you can go. Obviously, you cannot provide something that is not going to provide you with a return in terms of revenue. We have to be prudent in the decisions that we make. And as we move forward, it's going to be very important in all the decisions that we make to make sure that we've taken into account fair strategy and who's going to pay and how it's going to be paid for the service that we offer. I'm not sure if that's the answer you're looking for, but
okay.
at this point in time, I understand it's very important that we have a responsibility in the decisions we make, and there's a cost for any type of service that we provide.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mr. Mayor, to be fully transparent, I really struggled with this report, not because it's anything other than a fantastic report. It's 255 pages. I found it really overwhelming. So if I'm asking this question both because I had trouble digging in to some of the meat, but that maybe the public would also appreciate me asking the question. As I say, I've been a transit supporter since day one, and I was really saddened to hear the perspective of one of the delegates that there's lackluster support for transit, because that has not been my experience. As long as I've been on council, it's always a question of how much we can spend on transit. Or how much we can reduce the cost of fares to the consumer. It's always a real battle, and we've seen multiple route reviews. I mean, the city is littered with little concrete pads where bus stops used to be. And we've spent every year, it seems we're spending more and more money. And I'm curious as to what is different this time, because it seems my perspective feels like it's more money, but we never seem to get the satisfaction that we want out of that. So what has changed? What is different? What is the kernel that will give everyone the rallying cry with this report that I may not have been able to dig out with the 255 pages that I didn't read all of?
Through the mayor to Councillor Salisbury. So the majority of route changes in the past 2 decades have been very short-term plans that operate mostly within existing budgets and only for some routes. This plan is intended to be system-wide. It's long-term and goes to 2031, and it's seeking additional resources to attract those additional riders and to improve the experience for riders. And we also did review all of these past changes that have occurred to determine what has already been done.
So it's more, if through you, Mr. Mayor, it's more comprehensive than the route reviews we've done before.
Through the mayor, I would say that, yes.
Thank you for that.
For the mayor, Councillor Salisbury, if I could just add, add that.
Go ahead, Robin. Yeah, and then after you, Robin, I saw Courtney's hand go up to answer something from Councillor Salisbury too. So go ahead, Robin.
I just wanted to add that that is why we're taking the broad decision of from a hub system to a grid system that offers choices to our customers and fits nicely into the strategic plan. We're giving our customers options. You can transfer. We've got bidirectional routes that we're putting in place, another spine route. We're making the broad decisions to give the customers better choices, and that's a big part of the differences between what has been done in the past with small tweaks. This is a larger part of a puzzle that's going to last for long term for the next 10 years and hopefully get us to the transit system that the residents of Guelph deserve.
Courtney, did you want to jump in on, I think I saw your hand go up again around the sort of fare issues and how that would connect with Councillor Salisbury's question.
Yeah, so just go back to the RC ratio. Guelph's RC ratio is on par with our other comparator transit agencies, excluding the impacts from COVID. The overall transit RC ratio will be around 38% in year one if the Future Ready plan is approved. The RC ratio is only one measure of transit performance, and it can be impacted by our upcoming fare strategy. It's also important to note that it's common for the RC ratio to be fluctuating or be lower, but it can still be representative of positive performance or change, such as a service expansion or investment in capital, because the services rarely recover their revenues from the service changes at the same rate as the expenses. So sometimes it takes a couple of years to gain back your revenues after an increase to service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salisbury, I want to move on, making sure that you still have the floor, or can I move on? I want to make sure you're okay.
Well, I'll just a follow-up question. If I can, it was always my understanding that the reason we had a hub and spoke system of transit was because our city was effectively laid out hub and spoke, and that we have two rivers that run through, making a true grid system effectively impossible. One of the delegates mentioned Brampton. I grew up in Brampton. It's a grid, right? So you can easily run a grid system in a place like Brampton. And it has always been my understanding as to why we've held on to this. I'm not aware of any significant north-south or east-west corridors that have opened up since this report was done. And I'm curious as to why this is being called a grid system. When I look at the map and I don't see the difference, and that's just my own, maybe not reading the map as well as I could. I wonder if just some light on how we've been able to achieve a grid system with those geographic restrictions on us.
Through the mayor to Councillor Salisbury, it's more of a grid-like system is the approach that we're taking. The hub and spoke system, it does require a great deal of out-of-direction travel. And especially as the south end has extended further south, that hub and spoke system, it becomes much more inefficient for travelers to have to go downtown and transfer to go somewhere else. Basically, we're using the corridors that already exist that have never really been properly utilized, such as Victoria Road and Edinburgh Road.
Thank you very much for that. That actually makes total sense to me, because I look in the West End and I go, it doesn't look a whole lot different from what I've seen before. But of course, recognizing the citywide nature of this, it was particularly with regards to the South End, it makes sense that this would be more of a hybrid grid system than a hub and spoke. Thank you for that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Salisbury. We'll move on. Gawler, O'Rourke, Gibson.
Thank you, through your worship, to staff. Thank you for the presentation. There was a couple of numbers that I was hoping to clarify. With the Future Ready plan, it mentioned that there would be a 13% ridership increase, rideshare increase to 4.29 million. But the high frequency plan would increase it to 4.6 million. Just for my understanding, what percentage is that? Is that like a 15%? Do you have that off the? I could not find it in the reports.
Through the mayor to Councillor Gawler, we can come back with that number for you.
Sure, just so that I can compare both plans, seeing as there was a percentage for one. And along the same lines, I saw that the capital cost was 254 million thereabouts. Is that the same for all three plans? I mean, essentially we would have the same capital cost, or would it differ if, say, we were to choose the high frequency option? Would there be a different capital cost?
Just pulling it up. Do you have it?
Through you, Mayor Guthrie, we would be required to purchase additional buses. I believe it's an additional 35 buses that would be required over the 10-year plan.
Okay, so the cost of the buses, that would be on top. So that would be the cost of the buses plus the 253.7 million. Is that?
So the Future Ready plan is 26 buses, and the high frequency is 35 buses, so an additional 9 buses over the 10-year plan.
Okay, that would go. And just what would that be? Just ballpark, so that a bus is what, 600,000 or so? I'm just trying to understand what the capital cost of the high frequency, so that if we were to say move that forward today, we know what we're getting into when it comes to budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Goller, the electric buses are in the range of about 1.4 million per bus. Is our preliminary costing. We're still in the evaluation phase with those 4 that we've ordered.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. The other thing I was hoping for, the transit fare strategy. It has been mentioned a few times. What is our timeline to get that strategy done? Because if we're looking at changing, at freezing the expectation that we're going to recuperate 40% of the costs, so I was wondering for how long would we be putting that on hold?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Guller, yeah, Guelph Transit's plan is to move towards a transparent fare strategy within the next year, and move also towards finalizing our transit Guelph Transit Master Plan that coincides and fits in with the Transportation Master Plan, and part and parcel with the strategic plan, so that all plans fit together like a puzzle, and that we have a fare strategy that's been upgraded to industry standards and meets the needs of the customers that we have, and takes into consideration our costs and the service that we are providing.
Right. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. So is that for 1 year? Is that what I'm hearing? That by the end of 2022, we would have updated numbers that we could work with?
Our plan is to begin the strategy, fare strategy, by mid to third to fourth quarter of next year, and hopefully have that ready by the end of the year or into the beginning of the following year, depending on the strategy that we come up with.
Okay. So just so that I'm clear, that would be starts Q3 or Q4 2022, and then we would have a new fare strategy by the end of 2023.
We would be coming to council with our recommendation on what that would be. Hopefully, if the fare strategy turned out to be successful, that we would come to council at the beginning of the next year.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I guess the next question that I have as a follow-up to those questions is, if we were to approve the high frequency plan today, so to move that to the budget, and we were to not approve recommendation number 4, so we still wanted to get at least a 40% cost recovery from fares, what would the new cost be? I mean, I know that now it's $3 if you pay cash, or $2.80 if you have it on a card. So if we pass on the cost of the increase, the high frequency option onto the transit riders, what are we looking at? Are we looking at $4 a ride or $8 a ride? You know, just
through the mayor to Councillor Guller, we would have to get back to you on that number. Obviously, there's going to be an additional cost for that accelerated plan, and to give you the proper numbers, we'd have to take all in considerations and come back and get those numbers for you.
Okay. I would appreciate that, because I have been hearing from many of my constituents who who do want to have a higher frequency bus service, and they're saying that that would be one of the key factors in helping them get away from having to use a car or having to take a taxi or an Uber to being able to rely on public transit. But then the question is, if we're going to split that cost equally, as we are 60-40, what would the new bus fare be? So that's something that I'm interested in. And then along with that, to help us determine if council does want to support or entertain going to the high frequency, the other question that I would have is, if the goal is to increase the number of people that are stopping using their cars, they're taking the bus instead, but we know that if we increase the cost of the fare, less people are going to use it. What would that increase be by going with high frequency? Because I know that you've provided for me that the future ready plan would increase ridership by 13%. If high frequency increases this to say 15%, but then we lose some of that because of increased cost, that's something that I think would be very helpful when this comes to budget for us to be able to make a decision. Thank you for that and for all of this. Now, just stepping back a little bit, I have one last question. Do we have any examples from other organizations that are on track to achieving a 50% modal split, getting people, to what was alluded by some of the delegates? Is that in the realm of possibility, given your experience? Because we're looking at fairly low numbers compared to that. We're talking about 13, 15, 20. Is there any path that would take us from here to 50% by 2030?
Through the mayor, I wouldn't have an exact number on what that would look like. I'm not aware of any transit agencies that are making quite that large a leap. We did do analysis of comparator municipalities, and probably the largest increase I'm aware of was Kingston. I can't remember offhand what the number was. I don't think it was quite at that magnitude.
Okay. No, thank you very much, because I think for me, to the question, this is just commentary, to the question of having a significant increase to our modal split change, I don't think we can do that by just providing transit. I think we have to look at our whole system and do something to get people, all vehicles, onto active transportation. So to that point, I look forward to seeing the other master plans that we have in line, to see how we have other things that are coming online to support in getting people off cars and more into active transportation. But thank you very much for that. And I would like to, at this point, Your Worship, would you entertain us moving motions to change, or did you really want us to leave all of that for when this comes to budget? Any motions to approve anything that is not the staff recommendation here? So, for example,
in regards to your commentary around your questions, I think that would be best suited for budget, because it's all being referred to that point. I saw your thumb up there, and transit, sorry, not transit, but staff is nodding their head. Is that okay? Am I capturing what you're asking correctly? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect, because I am interested in moving the high frequency option, but I think we need a little more information about the whole cost of that option. Thank you.
Sure. And I mean, as I do every year, and I sent an email to all of council today, I always say the word your intentions, right? And so after the delegations are done on delegation night, you could state your intentions then, if you wanted to, in regards to the high frequency, or any other councillor could move an intention of what they want. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, for sure. Councillor O'Rourke, Gibson, Gordon, McKinnon, and I'm also seeing Karan and Bell. So, and a thumbs up there. So you heard me. Go for it, O'Rourke.
Sounds like a full dance card, Mr. Mayor. I have
Pretty much, I think so.
I have comments and some questions, and then I have a motion that is not a budget motion, but rather a strategy motion. Okay. So I would like to say I'm thrilled to see the return of Route 16. I'm so happy to see a conventional bus go into the Hanlon Business Park for the first time to serve all of those growing businesses there. I think that's extraordinary. And it was tested with the on-demand bus service. So I think that's wonderful. And I can't wait to see the Victoria route that's going to go all the way up Victoria. Because I'll tell you, when my kids were little, we could have walked a couple of blocks to Victoria and got on the bus and gone to the Victoria Road Rec Center. And that would have been, it would have made their day. It would have been easy. And so I'm really pleased that future residents, I know we're not going to get that one until about the 7th year, but what an ideal route, because people will still go to rec centers throughout the city and different places. So I'm really pleased with those. Just to come back to Councillor Goller's comment about ridership, I believe Kingston managed that big leap because they made transit free for kids under 14. And I remember as a young mom thinking, well, it's going to cost $9 or $12 for us all to get on the bus, or I can park downtown for $5, right? I remember making that calculation. And so if we can make it less expensive for parents with young kids to get on the bus and create young transit users to get to their part-time jobs, to get to the rec center, I think that's a great place to start. I would just like for staff to validate a couple things for me. Oh, before I do that, we're talking a lot about the funds. And I just want to point out, we're talking about a $253.9 million, $250 million investment in just the capital with this plan. And it's because we're doing two things at the same time. We're expanding the transit system and we're electrifying it at the same time. So I understand that people are saying do more, but we're actually doing this whole other piece as well. So it's this double benefit in terms of GHGs. So I don't want to lose sight of that piece, that we have to build a new transit station to electrify the buses, that the federal funding is contingent upon those electric buses. And so it's a major, major investment. It's a historic investment in transit, regardless of the option that we choose. What I like about the staff proposal is it gets the work done in 7 years. And I'd just like staff to validate for me to be sure I've understood that mechanism of service level. So the way I read it is that mechanism of service level, if the bus has a certain capacity, the hour before that frequency switches, then you can increase the frequency, right? Then you know we need that bus to run more frequently. So A, did I get that right? And B, can we also trigger more frequency after the 7-year rollout if we decide we could go faster through more funding or triggered by that ridership?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Rourke, the service standards would allow us to increase our frequencies based on our loads or our passengers per hour. So the load factor is intended for if we're having overloaded particular trips that are constantly overloaded, we would be able to alleviate that with an extra trip here and there, versus the passengers per hour, where we're achieving an average amount of people per hour during a certain period. That's when we're able to increase the frequency. So there's a measure of off-peak and peak that are slightly different numbers, but that off-peak number would allow us to increase the frequency as well.
Okay, well, and you want to see more people on buses, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I had a question about the RC ratio, just to be sure that I've understood the recommendation number 4. Will you continue to capture and report on that RC ratio, just so we get a sense of what the level of subsidization is? But you're just saying we can't hold the fare to that RC ratio. Is that correct?
To the Mayor, Councillor O'Rourke. If I understand the question, I believe you are correct. RC ratios tend to take a little bit of a beating during route reviews, and when you're making holistic changes, it tends to take a little bit of time until it counteracts and you start seeing the benefits of the decisions that you've made and the changes to your transit. So we do anticipate that the RC ratio will fluctuate between negative numbers and towards more positive numbers as we see the results of the decisions that we've made in the changes for our transit network. But we are going to continue monitoring it as we always would in terms of the metrics that we use, which will be helpful to us. It's not just an ad hoc decision. The metrics will keep us steered in that direction, and obviously my management team will continue to monitor and we'll make adjustments as required.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a couple more questions. So the letter from the Transit Alliance says there was a lot of feedback in 2015, a little bit less so this time around. Did you go back and look at the feedback from 2015 as well? Is it incorporated in this route review?
Through the Mayor to Councillor O'Rourke, yes, we incorporated that feedback as well as informal feedback we've received in 2019.
Okay, great. And just a couple of detailed questions for me. How many routes? You said we have 35 routes now, and then we're under the staff recommendation, we'll have 100 more operators, 26 more buses. Do we have more routes under the new model? We have to.
Through the Mayor, I'm just going to count on my fingers to double check. So yes, we would have more routes, but many of them also are kind of consolidations of other routes. So we've also found ways to make it a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, and not to make you do a whole lot of calculation, do you know roughly how many of those will be higher frequency? So right from with the staff recommended plan, how many of those routes automatically have higher frequencies under your recommendation?
Through the Mayor, I'm just thinking offhand, all of the 90 series would be increased frequency. So those are the Victoria, Edinburgh, Speedvale routes. And I believe a number of other routes would be higher, but I would have to get back to you on that exact number.
Well, I went through that 250-page report, so I know that a number of them will go to 15-minute service and then 20 and et cetera. So so that's quite all right. So I would just make a request, though. I understand that you spoke with the Transit Advisory Committee. I would appreciate if you would have a conversation before any of this rolls out also with the Accessibility Committee as well. Not as just mobility users, but as users of the usual system. I think that might be a good input to have. So I'll ask you to consider that. Okay. So those are my questions. I really think that this is a significant and historic investment in transit. I'm happy to support the staff report, especially because we have other options to accelerate after the 7-year mark. So I think that's spectacular. My motion, yeah, maybe one question before my motion. My motion pertains to interregional transit. So it's my understanding that currently Grand River Transit does not offer routes that come to Guelph, and neither do any other municipalities. So people have to rely on the GO bus to get to Aberfoyle or the GO train to get to Kitchener or to Toronto, or spots in between. So I'm concerned when we're looking at routes that Guelph Transit and the citizens of Guelph would be carrying the entire freight on those interregional routes. So I would like to table a motion that staff be directed to explore potential partnerships and/or secure grants to help fund interregional transit and report back to City Council with the findings prior to the design and implementation of interregional transit. I would like to present the motion because there would be a benefit to the neighboring municipality, and Councillor Alt has said that he would second. So I appreciate all the
okay, hold on, everyone. Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor. just from a process point of view, this seems very separate and unique on its own. We have a motion already on the floor that's been moved and seconded for all 5. We should just deal with that. I don't find personally that your amendment is changing really one of the 5 so much. It's almost a standalone. So I would prefer that we go through the 5, and then yours could then stand on its own, if that's okay with you, Councillor O'Rourke.
Sure, sure. And I'm
Okay,
doing it, Mr.
but
Mayor, out
I'll
of
let
a,
you finish
yep,
your commentary now, only so that we can kind of get that out of the way. And I don't mean it that way, but just get so we're in the moment listening to the
right,
reasoning. So let's get that finished, and then we can deal with it at the end. Okay.
right. So I completely understand that there is a desire for people to have interregional routes. At the same time, I'm not sure that Guelph Transit could ever fully meet that demand or expectation, nor do I think the citizens of Guelph should have to bear the entire cost of that. Now, I imagine the province is going to want to support interregional connectivity. And so I really want, from a cost perspective and from a shared value perspective, that we have some sort of cost sharing agreement with the other municipality, because it would be a net benefit to them as well to be able to come to Guelph and to have awesome Guelphites working in their communities. So at least that had been explored and or grant opportunities. So I'm looking at the costs. They are significant. I'm thinking about how do we keep those fares low for transit riders, hopefully lots of new transit riders. And so I'll have that motion ready. That's already with the clerks, Mr. Mayor. So when you're ready for it. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, we'll swing back to that at the end here. And as you rightly said at the beginning of your comments, I think I have a full deck here that's wanting to speak, I believe. So Gibson, Gordon, McKinnon, Karan, Bell, and I'm almost to the point here of I just don't know how much longer this is going to go on, which is fine, by the way. I mean, we have a dedicated meeting about this, so that's fine. But I'm wondering, do we need to take like a 5-minute break here? Like, because we have like 4 or 5 more people to go. So I'm going to say yes. I just think that's a good thing to do. So it's 8:41. I'm going to say a 9-minute break because that's how I feel. So 8:50. We're going to come back here at 8:50, and then we'll finish off the last 4. Okay, there we go. See you in a little bit. Okay, we're back, everyone. And I can see the screens turning on. Thank you very much. Gibson, then Gordon.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I have just a couple of comments. Again, I think it's just all varying perspectives here this evening, and I appreciate them all. I appreciate the presentation from staff and even the delegates. I think they bring their lived experience and their lived perspective to the table. So a little bit of high level thinking here. You know, the city sets a strategic plan. We have set a strategic plan, and the province and the feds tell us what our priorities are. That's just the reality when it comes to funding. So we set a plan, and the province and the feds tell us where we're going to spend our money. And this is a strategic direction that the federal government's taken to move people into transit, which is great. That's our reality. So we now have to reprioritize our strategic plan to align with orders from upper levels of government. So the question of what comes out, what gets delayed, I think those are all really good questions to have, because transit has clearly been put on us as a priority by upper levels of government. So on the funding side, I think the understanding, and I would ask our professional staff, but I've had this conversation with them many times. It's a well calibrated equation. Ridership equals frequency divided by cost, divided by fares, and there's a give and take, push and pull on all three of those parts of the equation to try and find the right mix. I think we all understand that if we increase frequency and increase fares, nothing might happen. If we increase frequency and keep fares same, ridership will go up, but vice versa. So I interjected with that comment and the question earlier because I think it's a valid conversation, and I understand the fare review is happening. I just hate the fact that it's happening in separate from this conversation. At a subsidy rate of approximately 60%, I think is where our city is sitting at. To be clear, for every $3 fare coming into our buses, the city of Guelph staples $4.20 to that fare in subsidization. That's just a reality, and that's just a perspective. We can all say cars are expensive. It's true. But quite frankly, transit across the spectrum, no matter if you go into Toronto, any major city in the world, transit also has to be highly subsidized for people to use it. Just look at GO trains. I think the actual cost of a GO train trip into Toronto is somewhere in the neighborhood of $40, but you can still get it for under 20 because that's just what it takes to incentivize people to get onto transit. I know that the perspective is that congestion is getting bad in Guelph, and the environmental costs, the congestion costs, and I just, again, a little bit more perspective, reality. We live on the far east end of the city. Before York Road was shut down for the last 2 years, before College was shut down last year for 3 months, before Elizabeth, before Stevenson, before the entire ward neighborhood in general was completely shut down, it took us 20 to 25 minutes to get anywhere in the city in our vehicles. Today, with all that disruption on our roadways, it takes us about 20 to 25 minutes to get anywhere in the city. I say that because if you take a perspective of what a big city looks like, London, Hamilton, Toronto, and you drive around those cities, it becomes very apparent that Guelph is not struggling yet with massive congestion problems and such that would force people onto transit because it's just a convenience thing, no matter how frequent the buses are. Our population is still, relatively speaking, quite small from a mass transit, mass population perspective. That's my perspective, and that's just the reality that I see when I drive into big cities. So I just put that as maybe another bookend in our conversation, that I want to ground this in reality. That I understand how this might be received, but tonight is not about trying to look good to any one special group. I mean, if so, I could offer 15-minute transit to any corner of the city for free. I mean, but that's not governance. That's not what we're supposed to do here. So that's my perspective, Mr. Mayor. I hope that we can, again, I'm going to vote to move this along to the budget staff's recommendation because it's the priority that the province and the feds have given us. It's where we're going to spend money. It's a massive expansion and overhaul of our transit system, which I hope we can manage to squeak into the budget this year because I think it's worthwhile. But it does have to be grounded in in perspectives from across the room. So I offer that. Thanks for the time. I'm going to be joining by phone now. Unfortunately, I do have another commitment that I have to jump to, but I'll just have to turn my video off, Mr. Mayor. So I'll be voting by phone from moving forward. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Gordon, then McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard, I learned a lot from a conversation, Mr. Mayor, that you had earlier with Councillor Goller. And also with, I think, Councillor O'Rourke, you mentioned that tonight you were looking for intentions. And I would like to state my intention based on what we've heard from our delegates from this conversation. And also, I feel that it's important that we honor all the great public input we had. So I will be looking at budget to explore the capacity of this council to embrace alternative number 3, the high frequency plan. And I'll just give a little groundwork so that with my intention, I think that I appreciated, it was a fantastic report. I appreciated where staff landed with their recommendation because they wanted a combination of being effective and moving forward, but also expressed in their words the desire to be fiscally conservative. My own feeling is that during a climate emergency, we cannot afford to be conservative. Any investment we make now that speeds up the process of climate mitigation, which this report can do, we'll get that extra money back through what we'll save with our infrastructure mitigation. So, and I'm hoping that over the next couple of weeks, we will learn more, and we'll learn what options are, what possibilities there are at budget time. So I'd like to conclude by state that intention, but also thanking staff for this tremendous report, thanking all the delegates and all that public input that has contributed to a great conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon, and everybody. I just want to jump in with trying to think ahead for everybody's sake to the budget and how we just need to be careful procedurally. So my recommendation, and I just want you to know I've talked about it with the clerk here, what I'm about to say as well, to just make sure I was going to say the right thing. My suggestion to council is that we actually refer number 2 for the plan, whatever that plan is, right? And the financial implications for whatever that plan is. Because the way number 2 is worded right now, it has the word approve and it has the word proceed in it. And I don't want any of us to be caught on budget night for someone to go, aha, I need a notice of reconsideration. And then we're stuck. We're stuck as a council, as a team, and that's not fair to anybody. So I think what's been, this is my own opinion, this hasn't been stated anywhere else, but I'm hearing lots of questions from councilors so far. I've heard staff say, we can get you that information, or we can get some of that information, and it should probably, I would imagine, and staff should maybe look to put some of this on the budget board as well, just for everybody to be transparent to see the answers to it. And that way, we're not caught tonight where someone goes, you need a notice of reconsideration on something on budget night. So if we refer number 2 to budget night, then that enables you, Councillor Gordon, you, Councillor Goller, anybody to go, okay, it's been referred here, I want to do the high frequency. And then we can have that, that's the plan, and then the budget implications are there for that night. Again, I'm totally saying this to help us procedurally. Does everyone understand that? Again, I got some of that vibe from the clerk as well. I'm seeing a lot of heads shake in approval to that, but I do see a couple hands. So what if we could just for a moment, I got 3 other people on my list. Let's just, I'm sorry I interrupted with that commentary. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that nuance. So I'm going to make a little dash and another column on my paper here under that sort of commentary that I gave to Bell and to O'Rourke, whose hands I saw come up in regards to what I was saying. So let me finish the regular list, and then we'll go back to what I just stated as the commentary there from a procedural point of view. So I'm going to go to McKinnon, Karan, and then Bell on the regular list.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have to start off with a question. So I've been running a bunch of spreadsheets, trying to really delve into the budget. One of the questions comes up on page 5758 of the report. And this is making sure I understand in the table, there's a column that says ridership increases from service changes. So I'm just wondering if staff could comment on that. That number, that column, if we did not do any service changes whatsoever, is that the only ridership we'd be losing? Like is all these changes that we're making over 13 years, is the only increase 1.1 million in total ridership over 13 years?
Through the mayor to Councillor McKinnon, we would have a slower recovery of our ridership if we were to do nothing. As well, the population growth would be the ridership associated with population growth would also slow down. We're making something less attractive, so people are going to be taking it. They're going to be deferring taking it if they can. If that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Somewhat. I understand we're making projections and there's no science, exact numbers with this. But if we see a column that says ridership increases from service changes, you're saying there are other ridership increases from service changes regarding recovery, regarding other aspects that are not in this column. So if we did absolutely nothing, we would not be just losing 1.1 million riders. We'd be losing more than that. And so the actual column should be higher if we're actually looking at the do nothing option versus the implementation option. It's not 1.1 million. Is that what you're saying?
Through the mayor, that's potentially the case. We wouldn't necessarily have the means to confirm that. But the column that is shown is the direct ridership as a result of the service changes, but there could be indirect impacts.
Okay, and obviously they're difficult to quantify, and so I get that. So looking at these numbers, I mean, I've been running them and comparing to 2019 numbers, which is probably a better number to compare than 2020, given what happened in 2020. So the staff plan is an increase after 13 years. We're looking at a 19% increase. The high frequency plan is a 22% increase. So it's only 3% more, where it costs $5 million. And what it comes down to is when you look at the staff plan ridership projections, the additional cost per rider is about 74 cents. And on top of that, you'd have another $1.92 per rider if you went with the high frequency plan. It just comes down to a certain amount of time. You throw enough money at something, you keep throwing money and throw money, and you're going to get incremental improvement. So if we put 100 million into transit, we're not going to get 10 times if we put 10 million. It's just that at least these projections don't indicate that. So I know that some questions that councillors have come up about, wondering about the increase and the percentages and that. So according to the spreadsheet numbers, and this is just everything taken directly from the report, it is an increase, but it is a diminishing returns increase as we go higher. It's because we're looking at having roughly 200,000 extra riders per year on average over 13 years. For $5 million. And that's where the difference is. And the reason why I think some people are bringing up the fares, because it somewhat does have an impact. A lot of people talk about comparing a bus to a car. Well, I can get much faster with a car. I can get places. Well, I mean, if the numbers hold out, you're paying $10,000 to $20,000 per year per car versus $1,000 for transit. So you're getting so much more because you're paying so much more. And so, yes, I understand the 3%, 1% decrease when you're looking at fare increases versus how many people you're losing. But if we increase the service dramatically, then we're looking at what is that number. And the problem with all of this, of course, is that we have three options because you cannot provide infinite options with sliding scales and everything, because this is as much an art as it is a science. So I appreciate everything staff did going towards this. I could certainly be supportive of something that was a dramatic increase in cost and a dramatic increase in service improvements that would maybe go from a $3 fare to a $4 fare or $5 fare, because we're providing so much more service, even if the net cost is still higher for the city. The marginal increases is problematic, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with the staff's numbers. I think the projections are probably as accurate as any numbers can come up with. But what it comes down to is we, as Councillor Gibson had mentioned earlier, we don't really have a super dense city that forces people into cars, when over the past 10 years, my drive in a car has increased 1 or 2 minutes versus something in a city where I was driving to Mississauga on a regular basis. And over 2 years, my ride increased by nearly 30 minutes. It was getting so bad. So a lot of commentary on that. What I really wanted to make sure I understood where the numbers were coming from. I encourage all councillors to really delve into the numbers, make some spreadsheets, run the charts, really get a good feeling of what those numbers are, and that will lead you to the right conclusion on budget night, because I think we need to have some great improvements in transit, and the staff report certainly suggests that. Thanks.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Karan and then Bell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I don't have a lot of questions because they've all been asked as well. The report is extremely thorough, so much input, so much data. It's really the one thing that I probably can walk away from this report is that the user experience when it comes to increasing ridership is something that's really hard to quantify. And so I think staff have done a good job of building projections. Our consultants have done an excellent job of modeling what may or may not happen. But from a user experience, what we're hearing from our constituents, what I've experienced personally is frequency and reliability. And we hear that over and over again. And one of the delegations said we're in our 3rd review in 11 years. And the conclusion of every review we do is frequency and reliability. So I actually will probably be one of those who would support the high frequency model, but I recognize that from a governance perspective, we want to take this to budget before making those commitments, and I will support it at budget. And so this is just commentary and not questions. I really want to encourage my colleagues that if you don't intend on supporting the staff recommendation at budget, then say so now before we move this forward, because I think the worst thing that could happen is that we give all the accolades for this report. We tell our constituents that we value transit and that we're going to make changes and we're looking for continuous improvement, and it's part of our culture at the City of Guelph to seek continuous improvement. And we know we have to make transit changes to best practice models. We know we have to drive ridership up to address climate change. But if we don't support this at budget, all of those words are empty. So before we take the vote, I just want to say, if you don't intend on putting your money where your mouth is at budget, I think it's important that we do that tonight. Now, I know, Mr. Mayor, you want to refer this to budget and we'll have all those discussions then. But I think staff need clarity that we're going to get behind this. We're gonna take transit seriously, and we're gonna get those ridership numbers up. We're going to address the modal split, we're going to address climate change, and we're going to put the resources where they need to be on budget night. So, yep, I understand we're referring tonight, Mr. Mayor, but let's not refer something and then slash and burn it on budget night.
Thank you for your opinions. Councillor Bell, then Alt.
Thank you. So I just have one
one question, but I'll precede it with a few comments. And first, I guess in about 2007, 2008, as a newly elected councillor and one that wanted to see transit improve, we managed to put in to the budget a route review, which there were a number of councillors at the time that didn't support even reviewing the routes, but our ridership I thought was better, and I had always been an advocate for a grid type system, and I was extremely disappointed when the staff and consultant report came back with the spoke and wheel model. And ever since then, I think we can all agree that we have seen declining modal share and increasing costs. So I'm very, very pleased that staff has changed direction and pointed transit towards a grid system. I don't understand though why it's not until the 5th and 6th year of the plan where the grid system is actually implemented. And I was wondering if you could explain, Andrea, why that why isn't the implementation of the grid system moved up? Because it appears from your ridership projections that the majority of ridership increase occurs the year of or after the implementation of the grid.
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, there's a few reasons for that. In particular, for the Route 98 Speedvale, that one is being implemented a little bit later due to construction on Speedvale. That basically the route would be on detour the moment we introduce it.
Courtright in Victoria.
Sorry?
What about Courtright and Victoria? They don't
And
come until year 5 and year 6.
And so for some of those other routes, the requirements to implement those routes are that a number of other routes are modified. So the impact to the levy would be significant. And we were trying to kind of keep that balance of the cost versus the implementation. And so basically with the requirement that one change requires the other, it's difficult to implement them earlier.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. But I am disappointed of the slow speed of implementation. And the only solution to that I could see was to temporarily change our policy on route density from 400 to 500 meters. That would allow us to move more quickly to a grid system. But so yeah, so I too am looking forward to supporting Councillor Goller's intention of the high frequency plan. I'm happy to see routes on Edinburgh, Victoria. I'm glad to see that the previously proposed Route 19 is essentially abandoned, and it will be integrated into the Courtright Stone Road. I think council made a wise decision on not implementing that route early. The new route of 19 going all the way up to the Stone Road Mall, I think, is a much better solution there. And I think that so for years I became very disappointed that we just couldn't seem to move forward with transit, and I don't like throwing money at things that I don't see the benefit of, but I can certainly see that we're getting really close to getting it right here, and I hope that our high frequency plan will get budget approval in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Okay, last on my list here, Councillor Alt, back to you. Oh, sorry, Alt and Billings. I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. I opened discussion by moving the original motion, and one of the reasons that I did that was it was my intention to improve the principle tonight. I was perplexed somewhat by the order of the motions. I thought that motion number 2 should probably have gone first, and then everything else would follow, because motion number 2 was clearly the enabling motion that we would have to deal with. However, we are going to deal with that one at budget, and I am quite fine with that. I think that I want to thank Councillor Caron, because I think it is quite true that it would clearly be somewhat inappropriate to vote to refer tonight and to defeat the enabling motions at budget, which are money motions. So I would urge you, as did Councillor Caron, to, if you support a hybrid grid system, please vote for the referral. And if you believe that that these motions are somewhat costly, then perhaps it would be more appropriate to vote against the referral. It will largely be a very, very long and delayed budget discussion if we are to bring these all to budget and to discuss them as we have tonight. We will be in this discussion again for about 4 hours. Similarly, if you wish to vote for higher frequency improvements, as Councillor Bell, Councillor Goller, and I believe others have suggested, it is absolutely imperative that we vote for referral tonight. So tonight, in some senses, is a night of intentions. If you believe that we can improve Guelph Transit by a hybrid grid system, then please vote for the referral, and please recognize too that that means that we are voting to support the funding of those as well. We can hash out whether we want to support the higher frequency routes later on, but certainly the staff motions themselves become the enabling motions for a hybrid grid system. That's what we're discussing tonight. And through your votes on the referral, we are clearly communicating to the city that we believe in, or we do not believe in, a new hybrid grid system in Guelph.
Okay, great, thank you. And oh, sorry, Councillor Billings, I forgot. Go ahead.
That's okay. Through you, Your Worship. With the high frequency, though, that would mean we need more operators and more buses. And so with the RC ratio, I don't think we include capital, though, in that ratio. So that's my first question. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Billings. No, it's only operating when we speak to RC ratio.
Okay, so I apologize because it was a while ago that Councillor Goller was asking his questions. But with the high frequency, what does that mean for our RC ratio then? Under high frequency? Like the other one, what you're recommending, I think is 38. I believe it's 38.62.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Billings, we'll have to take that away and provide you with the RC ratio for the high frequency plan.
Okay, And then this is a financial question, but if you can't answer it, that's fine, because tomorrow we're dealing with budget. So it looks to me like in the report, the impact for 2022 with the staff recommendation is a 1.26% increase. And that also, that 1.26% increase includes the 850,000 and the 716,000. That's my understanding. So first, is that correct?
I can jump in here and say yes, that is correct, Councillor Billings. It includes the capital.
Okay, then through you, your worship, to Tara. In the report, though, it says annually we need the 716,000 and the 850,000 annually. So, but it's put in there for 2022. So is it just a one-time impact, Tara, or every single budget, 23, 24, there's going to be an additional 716 and an additional 850,000?
So through the mayor to Councillor Billings, we did that on an amortized basis over the entire 10 years. And so that is a one-time capital increase. It would be in the base, and then that would be then kind of in the base to fund all of the capital over that plan period.
So it just stays in the base. Nothing else in the next 10 years. There's no additional with respect to 100 RE.
So just for clarity, that 100 RE piece is just for the transit expansion buses. Through the budget, you'll also see that through in the base budget, there is an additional request for 100 RE funding of 500,000 increase per year. And so that is the funding required for the current fleet and the current replacement fleet, as well as other projects that are that funding would be for across the city, other energy priorities. So the funding related to the capital expansion of transit that's before you, there will be no additional related to the transit investment plan.
Okay, thanks for the clarity, Tara.
Okay, great. Seeing nothing further, I believe. Let me just ask, okay, Councillor Goller.
Your worship, just a question. If we're considering deferring recommendation number 2, would it be appropriate to also defer the recommendation that talks about the freezing of the ride share cost, so that the ratio, because sorry, the cost share ratio, which I believe is number 4, because we may want to say if we're going to increase the cost on the taxpayer to potentially improve the service, would we not want to pass that on to the bus riders now, instead of waiting for 2 years before that gets caught up? So is that something that would be appropriate to also refer, if we refer number 2, also do that for number 4?
So through the mayor to Councillor Goller, I'll jump in and say at council's discretion, you could certainly refer number 4 as well. I do think that number 4 does still, regardless of which option you choose, there is still a time period where moving away from that RC ratio makes sense. So I actually wasn't uncomfortable with number 4 being passed tonight, because I do still think regardless of which option you choose at budget, it's still an important recommendation. But of course, if you choose to refer it, that's okay. While I have the floor, though, I'm going to take the opportunity to say what we do need you to refer is number 5, because it can't go without number 2. And so again, apologies for all of this, and thank you for your flexibility as we kind of navigate this. But we're just chatting in the background, and number 5 for sure needs to be referred to number 2. So I think what you're hearing me say is 1 and 3 can definitely be passed tonight. 2 and 5 need to be referred, and we'll leave number 4 to your discretion. It could also be referred if that's council's will. So through the mayor, just to restate, recommendations number 1 and 3, I believe are good to be passed tonight. For sure, number 2 and 5 need to stay together as a team and be referred together. And number 4 could go with those two as well, if that's the will of council. So you could refer numbers 2, 4, and 5 to the budget and pass numbers 1 and 3 this evening.
All right. Clear as mud. I now see Councillor O'Rourke's hand up. Go ahead.
I just have a concern that usually during the the budget deliberations, we're not talking about policy, right? And I think, Mr. Mayor, you often remind us of that. So my understanding was that tonight we were going to decide on the policy, and my concern about referring this to budget, and I have a few concerns about that, is we're going to start talking about policy, and we will start our budget deliberations at a 5.16 increase. We'll start there, right? So we're saying we absolutely want to do, and that's actually low because the 1.26 is for the staff report.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what the base operating requirement is, and then we've got a menu of things we need to add. In my mind, these were packages. Here's a 1%, here's the staff recommendation, here's the high frequency, and the high frequency wasn't even really packaged in sort of the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So my preference would be to have the policy discussion tonight, make a policy decision tonight. I agree. Don't say one thing tonight and then not support it at budget. My concern though is if we start messing around with this at budget, and when we discuss it at budget will be important. So that the order in which we make budget decisions will be really important. I'm concerned the budget may not pass. So I would like to make the policy decision tonight.
Yep, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So I hear you. I don't disagree with much of what you've said. I think the reason why myself and the clerk and some others here had talked about the referral was really predicated, trying to find the word, on Councillor Gawler's original questions that he had originally, where staff were indicating they needed time to go back and get more information. And so because there was a lack of information, I felt as the chair, it would just feel more appropriate for us to be fully informed before we went to make a decision. And so it's the will of council here. Like I'm just the mayor trying to guide us through it. So I don't discount what you are saying at all, Councillor O'Rourke, but at the same time, I just thought the 13 of us should be more fully informed. That's all. But you have the floor. Go back to you.
Then I have a question for staff, because we're asking questions now about a fair strategy, and we start our budget deliberations tomorrow at 9 a.m. Do staff really have the time to go back even before December 2nd and come back and say, we'll increase the fares without a consultation, without anything like that? Will we be able to get a different financial picture than what we have by budget night? So I'd like to hear from staff what their feelings are around, do they want a policy decision tonight, or do they want us have this important conversation as part of a larger budget conversation? That's my concern.
So through the mayor, I'm going to jump in and then others may join. So there is a staff recommendation before you tonight, which we stand by, and it is still our staff recommendation, and that's not going to change between tonight and budget night. We still believe that the staff recommended plan is the right plan, balancing the financial constraints, but also all of the goals that you have under the strategic plan. And there's lots of reasons, and we can obviously speak at length about all of the reasons why we brought that recommendation forward. We won't have a detailed fare strategy done between now and December the 2nd. That's just not, that's work that needs to be done. But I would say that all of this transit plan, we need to do a detailed fare strategy. There's other things about this that are going to, this plan is elastic. This is about a strategic decision that you're making tonight. I'm very confident that exactly what Andrea has mapped out for you tonight is probably going to be tweaked by the end of year 7. And I hope I'm not saying anything that causes our transit staff grief right now, but we know that there's minutia, there's details, and I don't want to dismiss the importance of those details, but this is about a strategic conversation and a decision tonight, and we were hopeful to get that strategic direction. And so if the whole matter gets referred to budget, I'm still hopeful that we can keep it at a strategic level. And to the mayor's point, we're not spending a lot of time at budget. I think the concern was simply that if you vote one way tonight with the hope that you can change it, there's a risk of that needing to be reconsideration. It was still our hope that you could give us that policy direction tonight and then ratify it at budget on December the 2nd. But hearing that there was some concern about that and talking with the mayor and the clerk at break, the referral to budget would give you that little bit of wiggle room, but I don't want to leave you with the expectation that we're going to come back with a significant amount of financial modeling that's going to change between now and then, because it's not. So it really just comes down to, do you want that wiggle room of not having to look at a reconsideration if you're not confident in how you want to proceed tonight on that policy side? But we're certainly hopeful that we not spend a lot of time on budget night having these policy discussions, because to your point, Councillor O'Rourke, that's not the time and place for it.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll just say that both the staff recommendation and the high frequency are a great improvement on what we currently have. And I don't really want to be put in a position at budget to have to vote against something. I'd like to vote for something tonight. I think the staff recommendation is excellent. I think it's scalable. I think it's reasonably affordable. It's very expensive because of the electrification, but it helps us meet 2 of those targets. So I don't really want to be in a position to look like I'm not supporting transit just because we're pushing it off to budget. So we can vote on the referral, and then that will slice and dice that decision. But my preference definitely is to make a decision tonight.
Certainly, and if you wanted to do that just from a procedural point of view, and first of all, there is no motion on the floor for a referral at all. So if there is a motion for a referral, you could always vote against and say, no, I don't want to refer. I want to make the decision tonight. You know, I think I did that like last month on something else. I wanted to make a decision on something. So, so yeah, we all do that. So we've all done it. So it's not a problem. Yeah, it's good for the public to know when someone votes against a referral, it sometimes doesn't mean that they're against the issue. It means that they want to make a decision now. So don't look at it in any other way sometimes. Okay, so I'm starting to really bounce around here and just trying to keep us on track. Councillor Guller, back to you. And then the mayor would like to ask some questions. I have not had an opportunity to do that yet, so.
Your worship, I was just going to move a referral, but I will hold until the questions are all done.
That'd be great. Let me just get my questions out of the way and a little bit of banter, hopefully not too much banter. And then we can move on because a lot of my questions were asked. I'm just curious, how much has transit lost this year?
I'm hoping Tara is jumping in. Good.
I was gonna say, if you could go to your next question, we can have that answer within a couple minutes. Just need a second to pull it.
Curious. I'm just curious. And I think the reason why I was asking that is just that in a way, I guess this is a little bit of the banter on me, is that it feels like almost like there's an opportunity for like a clean slate here, of re-kickstarting transit in a different way. And so that anyways, that's just where I'm going, is that we have this like loss of ridership and loss of funds, and that's a huge negative. How can we re-energize, or how can we remarket transit in this kind of devastating state that we're in because of the impacts of COVID, to market and to promote it? It can't get any worse, right? You know what I mean? Like the COVID has made it the absolute worst. So how can we make it that much better and attractive to people is where I'm trying to land on what I'm looking for the future. Now, a couple of quick questions here that have been, I think, answered properly already. Just want to quick yeses or nos on this. The fare review is next year, and Robin, I believe you said it would be done by Q3, Q4. Is that a yes? No? Thumbs up? Yes?
They're going to
Okay.
be starting at, yes.
Okay. And I guess if I asked, is there any budget implications if we were able to accelerate that? I guess it doesn't really matter because as long, you know, if it's done next year at whatever time, any fair type of conversations would be had in the next budget anyways. So it's not like if you got it done in May, that all of a sudden we can do anything with it because it would probably be a decision for the next budget anyways. I see Colleen shaking her head, so I'll take that as a yes. Okay. And there is some commentary. I'm just going to yell out the page number, page 21 out of 194, around the transportation master plan. And how I just, again, for clarity, I just want to make sure the commentary in that paragraph on that page does speak to how this really has, even though we haven't officially approved the transportation master plan, doing these in parallel, they are going to speak to each other. Not just the transportation plan speaking to this. My concern is also that this is speaking to the transportation master plan as well.
Through the mayor, yes, absolutely. And I think I see Ms. Holmes nodding there as well. I don't know if, yep, giving the thumbs up, so yes.
Okay. All right, so we're going to see the synergies there on that. That's good. Okay. I think I'd like to just approach this next question because I think it's been mentioned by a couple other counselors and a couple of the delegates too. You know, a long shot here, but what I'm trying to do is to see if there's any kind of connection between there's the infrastructure plan that we have through our corporate asset management that looks at the replacement of roads, the repairs of roads, the expansion of roads. Is there a way of, because we would make larger investments in transit, which would then reduce the impact of car, you know, usage on our roads, that we are actually then saving a little bit of that money from the levy that's in place to address those issues? Could we use a portion of the embedded levy now around infrastructure and siphon a portion of that off to actually go directly to these plans? Because we're reducing the repairs and everything on the road network that we have.
So to you, Mr. Mayor, I would say that you're thinking, I would say those are two different things. The plan that's before you is not about, I guess I would say, eliminating any roads that are already in the city. I think, you know, and
Okay,
the
hold on.
infrastructure. Oh, sorry.
Tara, I never said, sorry, I gotta jump in right there. I never said that we're eliminating roads.
No,
I
sorry.
yeah.
But I just, to connect that thought is that the asset replacement and the infrastructure
Yeah.
renewal funds are to take care of those current assets. And so we still need that money. And so that was really the thought connection there, is that we still need to take care of those assets that we already have. But where you will see, I think that, I don't want to say the cost benefit, but the kind of the financial strategy about the future is when you look at the TMP and all the information that's going to come back in the TMP, is that they did look at those different scenarios to say, you could continue to increase your road network for cars, or you could look at integrating the transit and active transportation, these other strategies, because that's the most affordable route for the future. And so I think like that's the piece where you'd probably be getting to that savings piece that you're looking for.
Okay. 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 That was all the questions that I had. Other than some of the other ones that Councillor Galler raised in his initial questioning between the high frequency and the staff recommended plan. So, okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that a little bit of time. So, as Colleen, our deputy CAO, indicated, and now all 5 of these are currently on the floor. There was a suggestion from staff that we could look to approve 1 and 3. We could refer 2 and 5, and 4 would kind of be up to us at this time. So, and then I didn't forget as well, Councillor O'Rourke, I have a number 6 for you. So, Councillor Galler and McKinnon, I see your hands up. What are you thinking, Councillor Galler?
Your Worship, I was just going to move referral for recommendations number 2 and number 5.
Okay. Would someone like to second that? Okay, Councillor O'Rourke, you're
Oh,
good
no.
with that?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. There's a motion that's already on the floor, so I think what you need is an amendment.
I took it as an amendment, not a motion. Yeah. It's an amendment to refer, not a motion. Yeah, I took it as an amendment.
My apologies.
Yeah, for sure. And it's good to have the clarity, so thanks, Councillor O'Rourke. And you're good still with the seconder for that amendment, right? You're not good with referring it. Okay. Councillor Bell, I did see your hand go up to be able to second. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So anything from council on number 2 and 5 being referred? Yes, Councillor Hoffland.
Well, so Your Worship.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hoffland, just a second. Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, just if I still had the floor, having moved that referral as an amendment.
Okay, did you want to say something further?
Yeah, just briefly
that
I like staff's plan, but I think that we don't have enough information, and I think we can do a little bit better than what has been recommended to us. But in order to make that decision, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our community to have full knowledge of what the actual cost of all of the options are, so that if we're choosing option B, we actually know what the full cost of option C was before we discard it. So I would like to see the full cost implication of option C, and those were the questions that we asked earlier today before we say we don't want to go with the high frequency option. So that's what I would like to see, so that we know fully what we are choosing not to do or choosing to do.
Okay. And Councillor Hoffland, to you, and then O'Rourke on the referral.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Guthrie. As per your suggestion, I came in here tonight ready to make a decision. I've read the report. I've done lots of research. I think staff have done an amazing job. As I said earlier, I believe we have to start somewhere. I don't look forward to having this discussion at budget. So I want to be very clear that, as I said, I'm ready to make a decision, but I don't support the referral.
No problem. Thank you. And Councillor O'Rourke?
I think it's a point of order, Mr. Mayor. So we had the recommendation on the floor. Councillor Galler has an amendment, but we haven't seen the language for that amendment. I believe number 2 needs to be amended to refer instead of approve staff's recommendation. And then I think we need language around clause 5. And
yeah, let's go to the clerk and we'll just see what he's been typing up a storm over there. So let's just see what he has to say.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Rourke, a referral does not necessarily need to be an amendment. So the motion on the floor could simply be that clauses 2 and 5 be referred to the December 2nd, 2021 special city council meeting. That would take those resolutions in full and add them to that agenda for council's consideration.
Okay, so is that the amendment?
I believe that was the intent. I see head nods from Councillor Galler. Councillor Alt, I see your hand, but Councillor Rourke still has the floor. So Councillor Galler, you're okay with the simplicity of that motions 2 and 5 be referred?
Yes, Your Worship. I believe that was what I originally moved.
Okay,
Or,
and
yeah.
Councillor O'Rourke, back to you. You had a point of order, so I'm allowing those. I'm going to make a decision that those two stand.
I just wanted some clarity on the
Yep.
process for that amendment referral motion and
Yep.
to ask that we see it on the screen, which I believe is customary.
It's coming right up for us. There it is right there. Okay, Councillor O'Rourke, do you have any further questions on that? No? Okay. And Councillor Alt, I saw your hand up as well.
Mayor Guthrie,
On the referral?
despite the fact that we're all over the place in terms of what we should do with this motion, I think that because I regard number two in particular to be in essence the policy motion that should be decided prior to a budget and budget motions, I will not support the referral in order to support the staff recommended plan at budget. I understand that some people might wish to do just the opposite for exactly the same reasons, but it strikes me that Councillor O'Rourke is quite correct, that we are beginning to confuse policy and budget, and we should be driving budget with a very clear policy.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything more on the referral motion that's on the floor? Okay, so I'll call the vote. Councillor Gibson, are you still on the phone? I see your name. So Councillor Gibson, I'll just ask only one more time. Are you in, if you can hear me, are you in favor?
Yes, I'll vote to refer, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on the screen, please show of hands if you wish to refer this matter to the budget. Okay, looks like it's going to fail, I think, folks here. Gibson and Guthrie and Galler and Bell. So that's only 4. So that's fine. And then just so everyone can see the hands on the screen, against, please. All the hands for against. Okay. So we got just, you can lower your hands there. So that fails. You captured that, okay, Dylan? Okay, great. Okay, so it failed, and I think it is incumbent upon us to make sure then that we just make a decision tonight on the policy part. Okay, Councillor McKinnon, I see your hand. Again, as of this moment, all 5 are on the floor right now. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to bring in a really simple housekeeping amendment, just for clarity, so there's no confusion. This is under number 3. At the end, it refers to section 6. I believe it should be clarified to be 6.1 because it doesn't refer to the entirety of 6, just 6.1, which is the Guelph Transit Service Guidelines. And so I just like to put forward that amendment just for clarity.
Okay. 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 Is there a seconder to add the number 1 after the point? All right, Councillor O'Rourke is willing to second that. And just so everyone knows, staff are indicating to me that Councillor McKinnon is correct. So I'd really like to call the vote on adding the number 1 after that decimal point. Councillor Gibson, you in favor?
In favor. In favor.
Thank you. And on the screen, in favor of that amendment? All right. That passes unanimously. Thank you. You'd think maybe Councillor McKinnon does rules and regulations for a living on some things. Good catch. Councillor Bell, did you have something as well?
Yes, I just had a comment, and I am disappointed that the referral failed. I think we saw these recommendations, I believe, maybe 8 or 9 days ago, and I thought it was it was a little quick to be making such a significant decision in such a short time frame. And originally, I believe that this was supposed to come to council at the committee of the whole, and it didn't, which would have meant that we would have had, 3 weeks or so to think about it. So I am disappointed with the timing of the whole thing. I think, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, oh, sorry, the clerk's just asking a question, yes? You were telling me to pull my microphone down? All right, good, we're on the same page there. Okay, so let's, do I need to do anything more to the 5 motions that are on the floor, Council? Okay, would anyone like them split at all? No. Okay, so I have all 5 on the floor, and then we'll go to a number 6 for you, Councillor O'Rourke. All in favor, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gibson on the phone. Your vote.
In favor of the staff recommendation, yes. In favor, Mr. Mayor.
I heard robotically all in favor of the staff recommendation. Okay, awesome.
That's correct. That's
all
correct.
Right. All right, thank you, thank you. All right, and then on the screen, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, is there anyone against? No. Okay, so that's unanimous. And then we'll go to Councillor O'Rourke for number 6, a 6th option for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I forwarded that motion to the clerks and to council this afternoon. And it is simply that staff be directed to explore potential partnerships and or to secure grants to help fund interregional transit and report back to the council with the findings prior to the design and implementation of interregional transit. And I believe Councillor Alt will second.
Okay, Councillor Alt will second. Is there any questions on that? Karan, I think I saw your hand go up. Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I wholeheartedly support staff taking this back out and seeking partnerships. We talked about this probably about 10 or 15 years ago with our partners in Wellington County, Puslinch Township, getting a link to the Aberfoyle Go, potentially Rockwood, Fergus, and Grand River Transit. So my question, even though I 100% support, is that we've actually directed staff to do this previously. Staff did some work on this, and I believe that they had initiated conversations with county council, and that there was already some back and forth. And I just wondered if staff could refresh my memory on what the outcome of those conversations was.
Sorry, getting my mask caught on my headset. So through the mayor to Councillor Cron, and staff may have more detail. Yeah, we have had a number of conversations over the years with a variety of different area sort of other levels of government. I think what's really key for us about this recommendation and that I want to emphasize is that this is about really looking to those other levels of government, and I would push to say this is very much a provincial responsibility as well, and those conversations very much need to happen with, I would say, starting with Metrolinx. And so yes, Councillor Cron, you are correct that we have had previous conversations, but really when we're looking to interregional transit, this needs to be at that broader scale, and this is not a problem that Guelph is going to be able to solve. And I think that's part of why we haven't necessarily seen things come to fruition that maybe we would have hoped previously, because this really is about that provincial responsibility. And I don't want to leave council with the impression that we as staff are saying Guelph is now going to take this ball and carry it. What I am interpreting this motion to mean is we are going to take this ball and go talk to the people who need to carry it for us. So that may include partners like the county, but it really is going to be more at that provincial level. With Metrolinx, I know Grand River Transit was mentioned as well, but for me, it's a little bit broader than those previous conversations. So I realize I didn't directly maybe exactly answer your question, Councillor Cron, but I'm hoping that maybe gives some sense to where we as staff think that we're going with this.
Yeah, that gives me clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, because our previous conversations had been with our county partners, and I believe they even took it back to their county, and it was all about who was going to pay for it. If we run a bus to Fergus, for example, will they pick up the fare gap from the boundary of Guelph to Fergus? And there hadn't been a willingness for the county then to take on transit as part of their budget. They've never traditionally had a transit system, so whether they were willing to partner with us. So that's where those previous conversations were. And so now I understand that you're not talking about talking about fare gaps between Rockwood and the boundary line of Guelph. You're actually talking about an interregional system that involves upper levels of government, not coterminous levels of government. So I understand where you're going with this. I understand the motion now, and I want to thank Councillor O'Rourke for revitalizing that conversation, because I think we've got some work to do there.
So through the mayor, I didn't want to jump in because it is Councillor O'Rourke's motion, and if I've misinterpreted it, I wanted to give her that opportunity just to make sure that I am understanding, but that was sort of my understanding of what we were thinking.
The intent of the motion is in the context of the proposal that prior to launching the route to Cambridge or launching a route to a university or a hub in Kitchener, that we have those conversations with that transit authority on see if there's some reciprocal funding that can happen, but to see if there's cost sharing available, and to also speak with other levels of government for investment in interregional. So it really was in the context of this proposal, not to start to broaden, because I mean, what we need in this plan is focus. I love that we're focusing from 10 to 7 years. I love that we're focusing on the number of people on the bus every hour, and that's how we're going to scale it up or down. So the conversation with other levels of government and so partnerships and grants is in the context of the staff recommendation.
Okay, and Councillor Alt.
Mayor Guthrie, I supported this motion of Councillor O'Rourke's because this is a time long past due. When I was a kid, I used to have to go to Kitchener by the gray coach bus, if people remember the gray coach, which was owned by the city of Toronto in order to go to the doctors. Those days are long past gone, but this is not going to be an easy discussion. We're hearing people talk about a Brantford, Kitchener, and Waterloo route right now, but one of the things we need to be aware of is there are provincial statutes that we have to examine as well. Some of these routes are granted, and some of them, actually, I understand that there is a route to Hamilton that has essentially been granted in perpetuity to a defunct coach lines, and that route has not run for about 20 years. They still have the route, and consequently, we have no transit. It is correct that this is a provincial responsibility in so many ways, and I think in some senses what we're trying to do is kickstart GO to be something that goes beyond Toronto to the satellites and the periphery as it is now, and to become an all-encompassing transit agency for the whole of the province of Ontario. If British Columbia can do it, then Ontario can do it. And maybe it's Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, Brantford, and Cambridge that can be the impetus for us to see beyond Toronto and see that intercity travel throughout an area like Hamilton, Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and Brantford matters for the economy and matters for moving people.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. I'll just have some quick commentary just because some of it was raised. Just so everyone knows, I have had conversations in this past term with our neighbors in regards to this issue, and then COVID hit. So I know that this issue is about looking forward, which I fully appreciate, but it's been on the conversation. We've had conversations. Secondly, in August, we had a delegation at AMO where I spoke directly to the Minister of Transportation, specifically in regards to when Greyhound left and interregional transit. And third, I've also had conversations with the private sector bus lines that are looking to fill the void for some interregional as well, where I talked to the province to see if they could be supported with funding to get that up and running as well. So I know that Councillor O'Rourke's message is more in context of the report that is in front of us and the future of how it's described in the report, but I felt it was important, since the topic was being raised, that everyone knows that that's been had over the last few months as a conversation. Secondly, is I just wanted to say that there is an intergovernmental point on this issue as well, that I know our intergovernmental staff would already be working on. But as the yearly sort of annual reports of intergovernmental, or whenever their reports come to us, when we're looking at prioritizing the intergovernmental work that's important to us as a city, we should make sure that we're also raising it with them as well on work plans and such, even though I already know it's on their work plans because I've talked to them about this anyways. So I just want to make sure that was pretty clear before I called the vote, which I'm going to do now. Councillor Gibson, are you on the phone?
In favor,
Your
Mr.
vote?
Mayor.
And on the screen in favor, please raise your hand. Looks unanimous to me. I believe it is. Confirmed by the clerk. That's great. Okay. So with that, I want to thank everyone very much. And Councillor O'Rourke, it's a good segue from your motion to the bylaws that you're up for stating for us tonight.
Yes, sir. So I move the recommendation that bylaws numbered 2021-20646 and 2021-20647 be hereby passed.
Thanks. Any questions on that, anybody? Not hearing or seeing any. And seconder for that, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Alt. Okay, Councillor Gibson from the bylaws.
In favor.
And on the screen. Looks unanimous to me. And now a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Billings, seconded by Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gibson.
Favor.
And on the screen, your vote, please. Looks unanimous to me. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great night. Stay safe, and we'll see you a few more times coming up over the next little while. Take care. Bye-bye.